What the fuck is an April 1st? Wow, Blibby, rude. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to set the mood. The better campaign isn't until Friday. Damn. Leon said tribalism in my Vandals. Okay. I'm lagging. Hold on. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. Alright, hello? Hello? It's me! Demon Dracula! Oh, gross. Hey, I can't make an opinion about C1 unless I was part of it. You know what? That's fair. That's fair. You know what? That's fair. Oh wait, you can make an opinion of it. What the heck, man? Hard to say there's another quality if I'm in another country. I mean, I guess you're right. I guess that's true. I guess you're right. I guess. All right, so let's boot up some spooky music. Cause, well, not really spooky. Hold on. Let's listen to some royalty-free sci-fi music. Nice royalty-free sci-fi music. That is loud. Okay, we're good. And it's no AI. Yay! I love reading that. I love when they're like, here's no copyright, also no AI. Go nuts, cuz I have a harder time deciphering AI music from regular music, especially when it's like no AI in sci-fi kind of lame. the bad kind of AI. The one that wants to take musicians' jobs. But yeah, I don't have quite the ear for Gen AI music. And when I hear a really good song, I'm like, dude, this is so cool. Made with AI. Fuck! Yeah, bad AI is great in fiction. That's true. It's AI you can destroy. Alrighty, but welcome in everyone to Desmond Dracula's reading hour, or I guess a couple of hours. It depends on how long the book is. It's not a very long read. I can get this done easily in a single stream. Welcome in. What we'll be doing today. So I don't usually participate in April Fool's antics, even if it's harmless. I like to keep my channel pretty clean, pretty smooth. That way people know what to expect when they come here. They know that I'm not going to be, overly silly. I'm not going to be doing anything crazy. They know they can just come here, chill, and not expect any antics. On Wednesdays, I usually do world building. And I was sitting here going, well, what exactly do I want to do? I've been working on my squid people. I'm straight. April Fools. Yeah, me. I'm coming out as straight. It's April Fools, though, so... Leon coming out. I don't like femboys. You hate TTRPGs? What the fuck? But yeah, I wanted instead today, instead of focusing on my world building, I want to focus on someone else's. And I've thought about doing this with other IPs as well, but I think the first IP I'm going to touch on is All Tomorrows, because I absolutely love All Tomorrows. It's bittersweet, and yet it's filled with hope, and it spans millions of years. It's a hypothetical as to what humanity could become and could experience. And yes, there are a few aliens, which is really cool. Hence the sci-fi music in the background. It can get pretty dark as well. After all, it's us. We are still human. Even in the book, millions of years later, we are still human, and you will see why soon whenever I read this. But for those who don't know what All Tomorrows is, it was written by a man, I believe, named C.S. Cozeman. Let me go find him. Yeah, C.M. Cozeman. And Yeah, it's a huge hypothetical timeline of what humanity could end up being. What would spacefaring do to us? What would meeting other species do to us? What would happen when we find something that doesn't compute with our normal understanding of the universe? And that's what this guy explores in the book. And it's called All Tomorrows because it's following different paths that humans have gone on. Now, I'm staying vague for a reason because we're about to get into it. But something does happen. All right, without that though, while everyone has filtered in and are ready to listen, I am cleaning my screen real quick. Alrighty. Let's get started, shall we? There's a lot of stuff in here, by the way, but they're tiny excerpts. A blink and you'll miss it sort of writing. It doesn't say when this starts. The book was written in 2008. So this beginning of our hypothetical future history is unclear. Alrighty. So, this is All Tomorrows by C.M. Kozman. It starts not with chapter numbers, but with simple labels of each part. This part is To Mars. After millennia of earthbound foreplay, mankind's achievements on a noteworthy level began with its political unification and the gradual colonization of Mars. While the technology to colonize this world had existed for some time, political bickering, shifting agendas, and the sheer inertia of comfortable terrestrial usurping had made this step seem more distant than it actually was. Only when the risks clearly began to present themselves, only when Earth's environment began to buckle under the strain of 12 billion industrialized souls, did mankind finally take up the momentous task. All through the decades, traveling to and later settling on Mars had been envisioned as quick, relatively easy affairs, complicated but feasible and manageable in short term. As the push finally came to a shove, it was realized that that was not the case. It had to go step by step. Atmospheric bombardment by genetically tailored microbes slowly generated a breathable atmosphere in a cycle that took centuries. Later, a few cometary fragments were knocked off course to bring forth seas, oceans, water. When the wait was finally over, remnants of Earth's flora and fauna were introduced as specially modified Martian remakes. When everything was ready, people came from their crowded world. They came in one-way ships, fusion rockets, and atmospheric gliders, packed to the brim with colonists sleeping in dreams of a new beginning. The first steps on Mars were not taken by astronauts, but by barefoot children on lush, biosynthetic grass. Oh, right, there's pictures. How do I share the pictures? I forgot, this guy also has illustrated his images, his stuff. So let me actually do that. I'm going to figure out how to share this. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to pull up a quick browser source for you guys. No, not browser source. What is it? My window? No. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to share this off this way, and I'm going to turn it on and off as I see fit. There we go. Yeah, I almost forgot. He has illustrations like this, where you can see what he's reading. And these are the colonists flying to a brand new Mars. A lander ferries the first people to the pre-terraformed Eden of Mars. There's going to be a lot of these. I will be turning it off when there are no pictures, though. The next part, the Martian Americans. For several hundred years, Mars remained as a backwater, prospering but still dim compared to the splendor of Earth, which was glowing brighter than ever before. Thanks to the relocation of environmentally demanding industries to Mars, Earth could usurp everything without having to damage its tired biosphere. This was the terrestrial heyday, the climax of economic, cultural, and social development on old Earth. This, however, was not to last. Like the gradual separation of America from her European mother, the governments of Mars adopted a new Martian identity. They became the Martian Americans. The difference between Earth and the Mars was not only political. A few generations in the lighter gravity gave the new Americans a spindly, lithe frame that would look surreal in their old home. This, combined with a certain amount of genetic engineering, took the Martians' separation to a new level. For a while, the silent schism between the two planets was mutually accepted, and the balance of power hung in an edgy equilibrium. But the Terra-Martian standoff could not last forever. With limitless resources and an energetic population, Mars was bound to take the lead. And then here we have another image. I believe this is of one of the Martians. The humans are slowly starting to go through some sort of strange warping, as you can see. The next part, Civil War. Because we're all still human. Even if we're millennia away from today and living on another planet. The Martian turnover was expected to occur in two ways, either through long-term economic gains or by a much shorter but painful armed conflict. For almost 200 years, the former method seemed to take effect, but this gradual stretch eventually did break in a most destructive way. Almost since its establishment, Martian culture was suffused with an explicit theme of rebellion against Earth. Songs, motion pictures, and daily publications repeated these notions again and again until they became internalized. Earth was the old, ossified home that held humanity back, while Mars was the new, dynamic, and active and inventive. Mars was the future. This ideology eventually reached its semi-paranoid, revolutionary apex. Roughly 1,000 years from now, the nation of Mars banned all non-essential trade and travel with Earth. For Earth, it was a death sentence. Without the resources and industries of Mars, the terrestrial heyday would quickly devolve into a pale shadow of its former glory. Since the trade of essential goods continued, nobody would starve. But for every citizen on Earth, the Martian boycott meant the loss of up to 3/4 of their yearly income. Earth had no choice but to reclaim its former privileges, by force, if necessary. Centuries after her political unification, Terra geared up for war against Mars. We always need an enemy. Most thinkers, and fanaticists, of previous times had imagined interplanetary war as a glorious, fast-paced spectacle of massive spaceships, one-man fighters, and last-minute heroics. No fantasy could have been further from the truth. War between planets was a slow, nerve-wracking series of precisely timed decisions that spelled destruction on biblical scales. Most of the time, the combatants never saw each other. Most of the time, the combatants were not there at all. War became a duel between complicated, autonomous machines programmed to maximize damage to the other side while trying to last a little longer. I have a cat yelling at me. Such a conflict caused horrendous destruction on both sides. Phobos, one of Mars's moons, was shattered and rained down as meteorite hail. Earth received a polar impact that killed 1/3 of its population. Barely escaping extinction, the peoples of Earth and Mars made peace and reforged a unified solar system. It had cost them more than 8 billion souls. And then, the Star People. Next section. The survivors agreed that massive changes were necessary to ensure that such a war never occurred again. These reforms were so comprehensive that they were entailed not political, economical, but biological changes as well. Remember, Mars was able to genetically change themselves. One of the greatest differences between the people of the two planets was that over time, they had almost become completely different species. It was believed that the solar system could never unify until this discrepancy was overcome. The answer was a new human subspecies, equally and better adapted not only to Earth and Mars, but to the conditions of most newly terraformed environments as well. Furthermore, these beings were envisioned with larger brains and heightened talents, making them greater than the sum of their predecessors. Normally, it would be hard to convince any population to make a choice between mandatory sterilization and parenting a newfangled race of superior beings. However, memories of the war were still painfully fresh, and it was easier to implement these radical procedures in the wake of such slaughter. Any resistance to the birth of the new species did not extend beyond meager complaints and trivial strikes. In a few generations, the new race began to prove its worth. Organized as a single state and aided by the technological developments of the war, they rapidly terraformed and colonized Venus, the asteroids, and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Soon, however, even the domain of Sol grew too small, Sol being our star. The new people who inherited it wanted to go further, to new worlds under distant stars. They were to become the Star People. And here's an illustration that C.M. Kozman did of what he sees as the Star People. Next part, colonization and the mechanical Oedipi. I think I'm saying that correctly. Even for the Star People, interplanetary travel was a momentous task. Early minds had boggled over the problem, and fantasies such as faster-than-light travel and hyperspace emerged as only solutions. Simply put, it was impossible to take a large number of people with enough supplies to even the closest star to make colonization feasible. The existing technologies could only slug along at mere percentages of light speed, making the journey an epoch-spanning affair. Enormous generation ships were conceived and even built, but these succumbed to technical difficulties or onboard anarchy after just a few cycles. The solution was to first go there and make the colonists later. To this end, fast and small, automated ships were sent forth to the stars. On board were semi-sentient machines, programmed to replicate and terraform the destination and construct its inhabitants from the genetic materials stored on board. A bizarre problem plagued such attempts. The first generation of humans to be manufactured sometimes developed a strange affection for the machines that made them. They rejected their own kind and perished after the massive identity crisis that followed. This technological Oedipus complex was not uncommon. Nearly half of all the colony's founding attempts was lost through it. Oh, hello, Cecil. Even then, however, the remaining half was enough to fill humanity's own spiral arm of the galaxy. Basically, humans were appreciating robots more than other humans. Next part, the Summer of Man. Right after mankind's colonization of the galaxy came its first true golden age. Reared by machine prophets, the survivors of the Oedipal plagues built civilizations that equaled and even surpassed their solar forebears. This diffusion across the heavens did not mean a loss of unity. Across the skies, steady flows of electromagnetic communication linked mankind's worlds with such efficiency there was no colony that didn't know about the goings-on of her distant siblings. The free flow of information meant, along with... Oh, I lost my place. among with other things, a vastly accelerated pace of technological growth. Hello, my kitty. What couldn't be figured out in one world was helped by another, and any new developments were quickly made known to all in a realm that spanned centuries of light. Not surprisingly, living standards rose to previously unimaginable levels. While this not mean a galactic utopia, it was safe to say people of the colonized galaxy lived lives in which labor, both menial and mental, was purely compulsory. Thanks to the richness of the heavens and the toil of machines, each person had access to material and cultural wealth greater than that of some nations today. During all of this development, a curious phenomenon was observed. While alien life was abundant in the stars, no one had encountered any signs of true intelligence. Some attributed this to an overall rarity, while others went as far as divine influence, resurrecting religion. Regardless of the theorizing, one question went truly and utterly unanswered. What would really happen if mankind ever ran into his equals or superiors in space? We have another image. I'm not exactly sure what the image is conveying, actually. I'm looking at it. It looks like a person floating in the sky? Something like that, something to that effect. But it could be something else. It says here, it actually tells me. Two-star people watch a holographic movie as they lounge under the remnants of their colonized world's indigenous flora. Okay, so they were watching a TV movie. Next part. An early warning. During those times, a small discovery of immense implications warned humanity that it might not be alone. Let me get a drink very quickly. On a newly colonized world, engineers had stumbled across the remains of a puzzling creature, considered so because it had every hallmark of terrestrial animals on an alien planet. Justifiably named Pandora, the colossal fossil, belonged to a bird-like creature with enormous claws. Later research determined it to be a highly derived therizinosaur, from a lineage of herbivorous dinosaurs that died out millions of years ago on Earth. While every other large land animal on that colony world had 3 limbs, a copper-based skeletal system, and hydrostatically operated muscles, Pandaceravis was a typical terrestrial vertebrate with calcium-rich bones and 4 extremities. Finding it there was as unlikely as finding an alien creature in Earth's own strata. For some, it was irrefutable proof of divine creation. Hello, Sugar Skull. We're reading our book. The religious resurgence, fueled at first by mankind's apparent loneliness in the heavens, got even more intensified. Others saw it differently. Pandaravis had shown humans that entities, powerful enough to visit Earth, take animals from there and adapt them to an alien world, were at large in the galaxy. Considering the time gulf of the fossil itself, the mysterious beings were millennia older than humanity when they were capable of such things. The warning was clear. There was no telling what would happen if mankind suddenly ran into this civilization. A benevolent contact was obviously preferred and even expected, but it paid to be prepared. Silently, humanity once again began to build and stockpile weapons, this time of the interplanetary potency. They were terrible devices, capable of novaing stars and wrecking entire solar systems. Sadly, even these preparations would prove to be ineffectual in time. And this is another illustration that C.M. Kozman made. A reconstruction of Pandaravis shows the creature's rake-like claws with which it dug furrows in the soil to find its food. Opportunistic local animals walk alongside Pandarabus, looking for morsels left over from its feasting. This is the creature that they found. It's a reconstruction of the creature, and the creature is from Earth. While these little creatures here are native to this planet, they are indigenous. This was brought. Next part. Ku. Spelled Q-U. The first contact was bound to happen. The galaxy, let alone the universe, was simply too big for just a singular species to develop intelligence in. Any delay in contact only meant a heightening of the eventual culture shock. In humanity's case, this culture shock meant the complete extinction of mankind, as it had come to be known. Almost 1 billion years old, the alien species known as the Ku were galactic nomads, traveling from one spiral arm to another in epoch-spanning migrations. During their travels, they constantly improved and changed themselves until they became masters of genetic and nanotechnological manipulation. With this ability to control the material world, they assumed a religious, self-imposed mission to remake the universe as they saw fit. Powerful as gods, the Ku saw themselves as the divine harbingers of the future. This dogma was rooted in what had been a benevolent attempt to protect the race from its own power. However, blind, unquestioning obedience had made monsters of the Ku. To them, humanity... Hi, Dread. Thank you! Thank you for the gifted tier stuff to Bastinora. We are having a live reading of All Tomorrows, a hypothetical what-if situation of millions of years of humanity's ups and downs. To them, humanity, with all of its relative glories, was nothing more than a transmutable subject. Uh-oh. Ah, yes. Thank you. Oh, jeez. Yes, love? Oh, yeah? Grab. I'm also gonna take a tiny breather and get a drink real quick. Thank you, Dread, for the 1,072 biddies. That is crazy. You know what? Let's just get a few more in there. Thank you so much. Ella. Oh, and thank you for the sip. You're right. What if I just had the rest of the book where I'm squeaking? That would be a hell of a live reading. You want to sit on my head and read over my shoulder? You want to read the book with me? I can't save this. Yes, love? Oh, he's reading over my shoulder. One's reading over my shoulder. And thank you for the pet. Dread came in, pushed all the buttons, and is probably gonna disappear after this. Alright, come here, Dread. Sit on my head. There you go. Alrighty. To them, humanity, with all of its relative glories... You just wanted to kick in the door. Understood. With nothing more than a transmutable subject. Within less than 1,000 years, every human world was destroyed, depopulated, or even worse, changed. Despite the fervent rearmament, the colonies could achieve nothing against its billion-year-old foes, save for a few flashes of ephemeral resistance. Humanity, once the ruler of the stars, was now extinct. However, humans were not. And this is another one of the images C.M. Kozman made. This is the Ku. This is presumably some sort of machines and nanotechnology that they have created. They look almost dragonfly-like, and they use their prehensile tails to manipulate tools. The image itself shows them dropping man. We are no longer the kings of our universe because the coup has decided to supersede us and are possibly the source of why a terrestrial being was found on a copper-based planet. They look very creepy, by the way. These things haunt my nightmares. But it's what they do that's even worse. Man extinguished. The worlds of humanity, gardens of terraformed paradise, seemed strangely empty to the coup. Often there were no raw materials available other than people, their cities, and a few basic niches of ecology, populated by genetically modified animals and plants from Earth. This was because humans had erased the original alien ecologies in the first place. Offended by another race trying to remake the universe, the coup set forth to punish these infidels by using them as the building materials of their vision. While this led to a complete extinguishment of human sentience, it also saved the species by preserving its genetic heritage in a myriad of strange new forms. Populated by ersatz humans. Ersatz? I wonder what that is. It's probably one of the people. Now in every guise, from wild animals to pets to genetically modified tools, Ku reigned supreme for 40 million years on the worlds of our galaxy. They erected kilometer-high monuments and changed the surfaces of entire worlds, apparently to whim. One day, they departed as they had come, for theirs was a never-ending quest, and they would not could not stop, until they had swept through the entire cosmos. Behind them, the queue left 1,000 worlds, each filled with bizarre creatures and ecologies that had once been men. Most of them perished right after their caretakers left. Others lasted a little longer to succumb to long-term instabilities. On a precious few worlds, descendants of people actually managed to survive. In them lay the fate of the species, now divided and differentiated beyond all recognition. Here's another image, and I believe this is a pyramid that the coup left behind. It's dark and ebony, very obsidian colored. It says, a mile-high Ku pyramid towers over the silent world that once housed 4 billion souls. Such structures are the hallmark of the Ku, and they can be seen on every habitable world they pass through. The next part. The worms. Their world lay under a scorching sun, its intensity made monstrous through the interventions of the bygone Ku. That's how you pronounce it. The surface lay littered with husks of dead cities, baking endlessly like shattered statues in a derelict oven. Yet, life remained on this unforgiving place. Forests of crystalline plants blanketed the surface, recycling oxygen for the animal life that teemed underground. One such species, barely longer than the arms of their ancestors, was the sole surviving vertebra. Furthermore, it was that planet's last heir of the Star People. Distorted beyond recognition by genetic modification, they looked for all the world like pale, overgrown worms. Tiny, feeble feet and hands, modified for digging, were all that betrayed their noble heritage. Aside from these organs, all was simplified for life underground. Their eyes were pinpricks. They lacked teeth, external ears, and the better half of their nervous system. The lives of these ersatz people did not extend beyond digging aimlessly. If they encountered food, they devoured it. If they encountered others of their kind, they sometimes devoured them too. But mostly they mated and multiplied, and managed to preserve a single shred of their humanity in their genes. In time, it would do them good. And this is what they look like. These are humans. At least, this is what the coup did to the humans. And this is not their only piece of handiwork. It says here at the bottom, the picture is described as 2 worm parents with their young. Next part. Titans. On the endless savanna of a long-extinguished colonial outpost, enormous beasts roamed supreme. More than 40 meters long by terrestrial measurements, these behemoths were actually the transmuted offspring of the Star People. Several features betrayed their human ancestry. They still retained stubby thumbs on their elephantine front feet, now useless for any sort of precise manipulation, except for uprooting trees. They compensated this loss by developing their lower lip into a muscular, trunk-like organ that echoed the elephants of Earth's past. As bestial as they seemed, the Titans were among the smartest of the reduced submen that remained in the galaxy. Their hulking stance allowed for a developed brain, and gradually, sentience re-emerged. With the lip trunks, they fashioned ornate wooden carvings, erected hangar-like dwellings, and even began a form of primitive agriculture. With settled life came the inevitable flood of language and literature. Myths and legends of the bygone, half-remembered past were told in booming voices across vast plains. It was easy to see that, with a few 100,000 years, humanity could start again with these titanic primitives. Sadly, as a catastrophic ice age took over the Titans' homeworld, the gentle giants disappeared, never to return. We have another image. This book is filled with illustrations. Some of them are very freaky. And no, AI did not have to do with any of this stuff. This was all made in 2008. And this is what the elephantine giants look like. The Titans, as they're called. Next part. Predators and prey. Devolved predators were common among humanity's feral worlds. Most of the time, they resembled the vampires, werewolves, and goblins of bygone lore, hunting equally subhuman prey with a combination of derived weaponry. Some had enormous heads with large killing teeth. Others tore their victims apart with talon-like feet. But the most common kinds bore modified fingers and thumbs, bristling with razor-sharp claws. The most efficient of these predators lived on one of mankind's first off-world colonies. In addition to paw-like hands with switchblade thumbs, they also had gaping, tooth-studded jaws on disproportionate heads with large, sensitive ears. All of these served to make them the dominant predators of their home planet. They ran the prairies, stalked the forests, and ranged through the mountains in pursuit of different people. Herbivorous saltators? Herbivorous saltators with bird-like legs. While their prey lapsed into complete animosity, the hunters managed to keep that spark of intelligence alive in their evolutionary honing. And we have 2 more images. You're going to have to tilt your head a bit. This is a prey human, and this is a predator human. You can see they have the hooked claw, and they have those strange ears, and a very big set of teeth and head. Next part. Mantelopes. Not all devolved people lapsed into complete bestiality. Some held on to their minds, while losing all of their physiological advantages to the genetic meddling of the coup. A singular species was a prime exemplar. They had been bred as singers and memory retainers, acting much like living recorders during the reign of Ku. When their masters left, they barely survived, reverting into a quadrupedal stance and occupying a niche as grazing herd animals. This change was so abrupt that the newly evolved mantelopes endured only due to the forgiving sterility of their artificial biosphere. The mantelopes, equipped with full, if slightly numbed, human minds and completely disabled animal bodies, lived agonizing lives. They could see and understand the world around them, but due to their bodies, they could do nothing to change it. For centuries, mournful herds roamed the plains, singing songs of desperation and loss. Entire religions and oral traditions were woven around the crippling racial disability, as dramatic and detailed as any on bygone Earth. Fortunately, the selective forces of evolution made their agony a short-lived one. Simply put, a brain was not advantageous to develop if it could not be put to good use. A dim-witted, half-minded mantelope grew up faster than a smart one and grazed just as efficiently. The mantelope's animal children overtook them in less than 100,000 years, and their melancholic world fell silent for good. Nothing was sacred in the evolutionary process. And here's the picture of them. Oh, I just realized they have stuff on them that we're not going to look at. This is what they look like, though. They look strangely elegant, if not a little freaky. It's also a very sad story. For them, at least. Oh no, they have a penis. Yeah. Well, because, C.M. Kosman is very much he's obviously not doing it to be sexual. He's being anatomically correct. He wants to show everything. And it's not in a sexual manner. And I do that sort of stuff too. And no, it was a dick. It was a dick and a large sack. But, I scrolled away from it. Alright. Next part. Swimmers. Perhaps because their life cycle involved an aquatic larval stage. Oh, hiccup. The coup had transmuted a large number of their human subjects into a bewildering array of aquatic creatures. Taken care of by specially bred attendants, these post-human water babies came in every shape and size imaginable. They were limbless, ribbon-like varieties of eel people, huge whale-like behemoths, decorative people who swam by squirting water out of hypertrophied mouths, and horrifying multitudes of brainless wallowers that served as food stock. All of them were perfectly domesticated. All of them were extinct when their masters left. All save for a few lightly mutated, generalized forms. These swimmers still resembled their human ancestors to a large degree. They had no artificial gills. Their hands were still visible through their front flippers. Their feet were splayed affairs that functioned like a pair of tail flukes. Recognizably human eyes peeked through their blubbery eyelids as they spoke to each other, though not in words, and never in sentient understanding. For millennia, they swam in oceans of their ecologically stunted worlds, feeding on diversifying kinds of fish and crustaceans, survivors of the food stock originally imported from Earth. With the intervention of the coup gone, natural selection resumed. The swimmers became more streamlined to better catch their fast prey. The prey responded by getting even faster, or evolving defensive countermeasures such as armor, spikes, or poison. Their evolution back on track, the swimmers drifted further and further away from their sentient ancestry. They would wait for a long time indeed to taste that blessing again. And then we have these guys. These are the swimmers. Human-like, but not human enough. After that, lizard herders. They were the lucky ones. Instead of unrecognizably distorting them as they had done to most of their subjects, the coup had merely erased their sentience and stunted the development of their brains. Distantly resembling their ancient forebears on Earth, the primitives led feral lives for an unnaturally long time. They never regained sentience after the coup left, despite having every incentive to do so. This was partially due to the total absence of predators on their garden world, resulting in no advantage for intelligence. Furthermore, the coup had made some small but integral changes to their brains, tweaking with the structure of the cerebellum so that certain features associated with heuristic learning could never emerge again. Once again, the reasons for these baffling changes remain known only to the coup. And that is actually seen in evolution. If you don't have pressure, you will not evolve. The lizard herders did not have the pressure to evolve. The dumb people, that's mean, eventually settled in a symbiosis with some of the other creatures that inhabited the planet. Thank you, Gil. Tall and young and straight, April Fools. Thank you. That's so sweet of you. Yes, welcome in, everyone. For those of you just filing in, we are reading All Tomorrows. It's a hypothetical of millions of years of humanity spanning across the galaxy. Where was I? They began to instinctively farm some of the large herbivorous reptiles, ancestors of which were brought from Earth as pets. Soon, the balance of this mutualism began to tip in the reptiles' favor. The tropical climate of the planet gave them an inherent advantage, and they underwent a spectacular radiation of different species. They encountered no competition from the only large mammals on the planet, the brain-neutered descendants of the starfarers. Faced with a reptilian turnover, the only adaptation the submen could muster was to slip quietly into bestial oblivion. And you can see here, this is what they look like. This is a lizard herder, but the lizard is actually more intelligent than the human. No longer does humanity in this planet have its mental capacity anymore. Next part, Tempter. In the Tempter's case, the remodeling was done with an almost artistic enthusiasm. How they managed to survive in their bizarre form was not clear. Their ancestors were used as sessile decoration, and through some miracle of adaptation, they had endured. No human would have recognized them as their descendants. The females were beaked cones of flesh, some 2 meters tall, rooted in soil like grotesque carnivorous plants. The males, on the other hand, resemble contorted bipedal monkeys. Unlike their mates, they were perfectly ambulatory. Dozens of them ran around the females' mounds like so many imps. Some would gather food, others would clean the females, while others would stand on guard for danger. Although their actions looked purposeful, the males had no will of their own. In Tempter society, females controlled everything. Using a combination of vocal and pheromonal signals, they guided the masculine hordes into any number of menial tasks, while mating with the strongest, the most obedient, and the dumbest, to produce even better drones. On certain periods, they would also give birth to a few precious females, who would be carried away by subservient males to root themselves. It was a terribly efficient hegemony that would certainly give rise to civilization in a matter of centuries, had fate not intervened, as a stray comet obliterated the Tempter's mound forests. One of humanity's best chances for re-emergence was cruelly swept away. And I will show you what they look like. Once again, they all look Very upsetting. This is a female, and this is a male. And she's controlling him completely. And you can just barely make out a nose, mouth, and eye. And this was once an ear, and this was once hair on a head. This is one of the chilling things to me about the coup. They genetically modified humanity to look like these things. That's what these creatures are a byproduct of. The coup manipulating us. Yes, Dread, they do, actually. Thank you for asking. That is exactly what you think it is. All Tomorrows is both fascinating and also fucked up. Bone Crusher. Next part. Let me get a little sip real quick. I do want to nurture my throat. Through the deliberate modifications of coup and the blind molding of evolution, the heavens came to be populated with creatures that would put the myths of their ancestors to shame. Their ancestors were pint-sized pets of coup that were bred for the dazzling colors of their tooth-derived beaks. When their masters left, most of these pampered creatures died, with no one or nothing left to take care of them, but some, belonging to the hardiest of breeds, survived. Survival of the fittest, after all. In less than a geological eye blink of a few million years, the descendants of such creatures radiated into evolutionary vacuum of their garden world. One lineage led to a profusion of human herbivores. These were preyed upon by a variety of enamel-beak raptors. Each evolved to deal with a specific prey. Among these generalized niches were entire assemblages of specialized animals, resembling anything from ibis-billed swamp sifters to splenderous forms with bizarre crests that flared out of their toothy beaks. There were even secondarily sentient forms, in the shape of the ogre-like bone crushers. To an observer of today, they would indeed be the stuff of nightmares. 3 meters tall and hairy, sporting vicious thumb claws and enormous beaks that suited their scavenging diet. It's just giant teeth, yes. Despite their shortcomings, these corpse-eating primitives were one of the first species to attain intelligence, and although primitive, a level of civilization. All of this proved the fallacy of human prejudice in the post-human galaxy. A creature could feed on putrefying meat, stink like a grave, and express its affection, I forgot this is in the book, by defecating on others. But it might as well be your own grandchild, and the last hope for mankind. In eventuality, however, not even the Bone Crushers fulfilled this promise. Their dependency on carrion for food limited their population severely, and their medieval civilizations crumbled after a few uneventful millennia. So they didn't last either. I hate this. Would you like to see a picture of this? There's pictures. There they are. The Bone Crushers. Carrion, vulturous, rotting meat devouring creatures that still couldn't figure out how to retain their humanity. Dread is hiding. Next. Oh, these are sad. Colonials. Their world had given the toughest resistance against the coup onslaught. So tough, in fact, they had turned back 2 successful waves of the invaders, only to succumb to the third. The coup, with their twisted sense of justice, wanted to make them pay. Even extinction would be too light a punishment for resisting the star gods. The humans of the rogue world needed a sentence that would remind them of their humiliation for generations to come. So they were made into disembodied cultures of skin and muscle, connected by a skimpy network of the most basic nerves. They were employed as living filtering devices, subsisting on the waste of the Ku civilization like mats of cancer cells. And just to witness and suffer their wretched fate, their eyes, together with their consciousness, was retained. For 40 million years they suffered. Generation after generation were born into the most miserable of lives, while absorbing the pain of all that they were going through. When the Ku left, they hoped for a quick extinction. But their lowliness had also made them efficient survivors. Unchecked by the Ku, the colonials spread across the planet in a quilt-like fields of human flesh. After an eternity of tortured lives, the human fields tasted something that could almost be described as hope. And, we have pictures. We have pictures. Here they are. All that's left of humanity. This is what the Ku had done to them. Next part. Flyers. They were not uncommon at all in the domain of the Ku. At least a dozen worlds sported human-derived flying species of one kind or another. It does give Doctor Who vibes, you are correct. Most resembled the bats or the pterosaurs of the bygone past, dancing through the aether like angels, or demons, depending on the point of view. There were a few bizarre kinds relied on swollen gas glands for flotation as well. Sadly, most of these creatures were already too specialized to be anything but flyers. They had forsaken their humanity for the conquest of the sky. They had little potential for further radiation beyond their limited roles. The only exception proved out to be a monkey-like species that flew on winged membranes stretched across the last two fingers. Their advantage was a unique, turbine-like heart, artificially developed during the regime. That was a hiccup. During the regime of the Q. No other human flyer in the galaxy had such an adaptation. The starfish-shaped organs sat in the middle of their chests, directly funneling oxygen from the lungs to the bloodstream in a supremely efficient way. This meant that the flyers could develop energy-consuming adaptations, such as large brains, without having to give up on their power of flight. Not that the flyers were going to reclaim their sentience right away. Instead, they literally exploded into the skies, filling the heavens with anything from bomber-sized sailors to impossibly fast predators that raced with sound. Their world was pristine, and there were plenty of niches to play in. Intelligence could wait a little longer. And we have a picture of one of these dudes. This is one of the flyers. They have a strange-shaped heart in their body that allows for them to go at extremely quick speeds with little issue. Next part. The hand flappers. Let me get a sip real quick. Some flying post-humans reapproach sentience in an entirely different way. Without the augmented metabolisms or the gravitational advantages of their siblings on distant planets, they had no choice but to give up their power of flight in order to develop further. The hand flappers were one such species. Their wings, once used for butterfly-like flutters in the unearthly gardens of the Ku, had shrunken and reverted back into the manual condition. Their legs were likewise readapted, but they bore a splayed awkwardness from the perching ancestry. Only a singular and almost sadistically simple flaw held them back from developing civilization. In the course of their secondary atrophy, the wings of the hand flappers had become useless as hands as well. Their flag-like appendages were very useful in signaling and mating dances, but they couldn't hurl missiles, construct shelter, or even manufacture basic stone tools. All that they could do with their useless hands was to display each other's sexual availability, so that the hand flappers did just that, flashing and dancing their way into oblivion. I have a picture, but I have to be careful about how I show it. Because once again, C.M. Coastman shows a lot. So we'll stop it about here. This is one of the creatures. Their hands have since devolved from its more wing-like state into a more hand-like state. But it's not enough. They do also have bow legs and a very, very large set of appendages between the legs. That's all I'm going to say. Next part. Blind folk. When the coup came, they dug in, and dug in deep. Inside several continent-sized shelters under their besieged world, they waited for the invaders to pass them by. It was a futile gamble. The coup located the shelter caves and remade the inhabitants without effort. The shelters became home to an entirely different ecology, a realm of perpetual darkness, fueled by the trickle of water and nutrients from the world outside. A surprisingly complex ecology developed on this scant resource. Gigantic pale insects, the descendants of common household pets, competed with Dali-esque birds and rodents over fields of overgrown fungi. Predators were not uncommon. Almost crocodilian fish patrolled the underground streams, and vast blind bats, echolocating with unnerving precision, took their toll on the residents of the cave floor. The kilometer-high ceilings of the shelters glowed in the dark with protean constellations of bioluminescent fungi, and in some cases, animals. People were present as well, albeit in unfamiliar forms. They were more often heard than seen, as they tried to find their way in the realm where sound and touch, not sight, was the gateway of perception. They had developed long, tactile fingers, enormous whiskers, and mobile ears to live in the dark. Where their eyes should have been, there was nothing but a patch of haunting, flawlessly smooth skin. Their perfect adaptation to the world of darkness had erased the most basic feature of human recognition. As adapted as they were doomed. Before the blind folk could develop any kind of intelligence to crawl out of their geographical caves, the glacial constriction of their world's continental plates snuffed out their shelters, one by one. And I will show you what they look like. Once again, I cannot show everything. But this is a male, and this is his daughter. You can see they have those fingers. There are areas where you can find... Here, I'll do this as well. There we go. I'm sure there's places where you can find these uncensored images. Yeah, it says here that this is a startled blind father with his year-old daughter. Lopsiders, next part. The coup were grotesquely creative in their redesign of the human worlds. One group of misfortunate souls they transported to a planet with 36 times the amount of normal gravity, and made them over for the life in this bizarrely inhospitable realm. The results of these experiments resembled nightmare sketchings of Bosch, Dali, or Picasso. They looked like cripples, squashed between sheets of glass. I don't like that word. 3 out of their 4... Remember, this book was written in 2008. This book is almost 20 years old. They will be using weird language that makes me uncomfortable. 3 out of their 4 limbs had become paddle-like organs for crawling. Only one of their arms remained a spindly tool of manipulation. This singular, wizened limb also doubled as an extra sensor, like the antenna of an insect. Their faces were different horrors altogether. All pretensions of symmetry, the hallmark of terrestrial animals from jawless fish onwards, were completely and utterly done away with. One bulging eye stared directly upward, while the other scanned ahead, in the direction of the creature's vertically opening jaws. The ears were likewise distorted. Monstrous as they looked, these X-Men thrived in their heavy gravity environment. Once again, there was the usual explosion of species into every available niche, and the Lopsiders consolidated their chances for a renewed sentience. What's up? You're okay, baby. And obviously, we have a picture. You can see this is the one hand they use for scooting along. They have one for sensory. I don't know what they're doing here. A Lopsider feeds indigenous pets native to his high-gravity world. The domestication of native fauna is the Lopsider's first step on the long way towards civilization. Okay, so he's feeding his pets. And they look a lot like a flounder fish, if you know what that is. Next part, Striders. While the Lopsiders were redesigned to live under extreme gravity, another species had been adapted for life under the exact opposite conditions, on a Jovian moon with 1/5 of Earth's gravity. It was a world of wonders, where even the grass grew almost 10 meters tall, and the trees were beyond belief, towering to sizes attained only by the skyscrapers of antiquity. In these surreal forests lived equally spectacular fauna, the descendants of pets, pests, and livestock of humans, who in turn had been reduced to animosity as well. One could see them in league-tall forests, almost dancing among the trees, as they reared higher and higher to browse. Their arms, legs, and necks had been stretched impossibly thin. Great flaps of skin blossomed throughout their bodies to dispense waste heat. Sometimes they would even change color in order to reflect light and keep cool. Overheating was a great problem for their grotesquely tall, thin bodies. Although imposing, these... oh man, that's a word. These Giacometian? The word is spelled like this. Your ramming speed. Yeah. Giacometian wraiths were overdeveloped as to be sickeningly fragile. Even on their gravitationally forgiving world, a fall could shatter bones, and slipping down from a branch would prove to be fatal. Sometimes, on the open plains, even a strong wind could bring them down, like the toppling of masts. They survived entirely due to the merciful conditions of their garden world, which was about to change drastically. After 2 million years after the Q left their towering works of human art, a lineage of fearsome predators evolved from the terrestrial poultry that had gone feral on the planet. Resembling attenuated versions of their dinosaur ancestors, they're talking about chickens. Chickens evolved back into T-Rexes. The predators swept through the garden world like wildfires, extinguishing any species too fragile to escape or resist. The peaceful, delicate Striders were among the first to go. And we have another picture. They look like this. They're like these tall giraffine creatures with stripes, and you can see how tall the trees are getting. They're actually very pretty. I really like how they look. Next part. Parasites. Humanity had diverged into two separate lineages on this world. On one hand, there were several races among the Australopithecine. I don't know what to use for that. Degraded by the coup for managing to turn back their initial wave of invasion. Yet, simple atavism was too light a punishment for them. Their twisted relatives, the parasites, were made up the second part of their sentence. There were actually several kind of parasitic X-people, ranging from tortoise-sized ambulatory vampires to the most common fist-sized variety that lived attached to their hosts. There were even a tiny endoparasitic kind that infested the wombs of female victims like ghastly living abortions. That is an image. All of these evolutionary tortures were played out under the careful scrutiny of the coup for 40 million years. The punishment was so baroque, so elaborate, that most of the artificial parasite-host relationships died out when the coup left. Some submen learned to cleanse their tick-like relatives by drowning, burning, or even eating them. Others, like the uterine parasites, died out as their aggressive method of parasitism effectively sterilized their hosts. Yet one or two varieties did manage to cling to their hosts with abdominal suckers, muscular, gripping limbs, and sterile, pain-soothing saliva. But their success did not lie entirely in the strength of their parasitical advantages. They also learned to regulate their hosts, not killing them by overinfestation, and thus ensuring their own long-time survival as well. Whale? Well, my accent tried to come out. I'm so sorry. In any case, total single-sided relations were rare in any ecology, natural or artificial. In millennial cycles, the cousin species' vicious parasitism began to give way into something more beneficial for both sides. That is a horrifying looking creature. This is what the parasite looks like. He's got suckers on his toes, on his fingers, and it's almost like a leech with his mouth. Very, very gross little creature. I want to know how C.M. Kozman drew on people like this. Because I want to know how he got those textures. The art he does looks so interesting and surreal and very cool to me. As someone who loves evolutionary theory and hypothetical evolutionary chains like what we're reading here, it's really cool to think about. Alright, next part. Fingerfishers. Their ancestors were trapped on an archipelago world, a planet sprinkled with many small continents and countless islands over interconnected networks of calm, shallow seas. Like a magnified Aegean, this place was a terrestrial paradise in many respects, except that, after the coup, no minds were left to enjoy it. On this vacant biosphere, evolution was quick to begin her blind, unpredictable dance. Once feral, the descendants of degenerate humans adapted themselves to every available niche, no matter how exotic, how outlandish. When you fit yourself into an ecological niche, that is just an evolutionary term for someone who fits the climate that they've found themselves in. No matter how exotic or how outlandish, one group learned to pluck fish from the lazy shores. Millennia passed, and they settled more into their piscatorial lifestyle. Elongated fingers became ambulatory fish hooks. Teeth, modified for a generalized diet, became needle-like affairs, lined up neatly in a long, thin muzzle. In less than 2 million years, the fingerfishers established themselves as a prominent lineage. There was scarcely a beach, an island, or an estuary that was devoid of their pale, lanky forms. As prolific as they were, the fishers were still no better than animals. Their humanity would come only after another spasm of outlandish adaptations. I can show you the picture, but I'm going to have to hide some of it once again. I'm going to have to keep him hidden a little bit. This is one of the finger fishers. His fingers are long, hook-like appendages. Let's see if I can't show that off too. There they are. These are those hooks from the middle finger. And it reminds me a lot of the eye. I also have a finger that does that. Next part. Hedonists. Even the blissful existence of the finger fishers would have seemed bothersome to the hedonists. Hi, Cecil. For their kind was not evolved, but designed for a life of pleasure.
Wait a minute.
You know who I am.
Who are you?
You know what? I'll take this opportunity to let you all know, hey, it's technically April Fool's Day, but I don't participate in that. This is usually World Building Wednesday, but I wanted to take the opportunity to live read a book that I really like, but it's also kind of fucked up. And it is a hypothetical future that humans could go through if we were to ever meet superior geneticist extraterrestrial beings that happen to want to change us. And all of these creatures that I have been reading out and listing are types of humans. Humans that have been altered. Oh yeah, I've heard of it. It's a very good read, but it is an old book. Well, I say old, 2008, but that is almost 20 years, which makes me feel very old. Next part, hedonists. Even the blissful existence of the finger fishers would have seemed bothersome to the hedonists, for their kind was not evolved, but designed for a life of pleasure. The coup had kept them as pampered pets, set loose in a tropical island world of succulent fruits, bountiful trees, and calm, lapping lakes full of the sweet, bacterial mana. Furthermore, the hedonists were left as the only animal life on this place. They had no choice but to enjoy it to the fullest. In normal conditions, any given species would quickly crowd out such a utopian environment. But normal conditions had never been the point of the coup redesign. They had altered their subjects so that they could conceive only after mating an enormous number of potential suitors, continually over a period of decades. While this took care of the population problem, it also made the species less adaptable. Without any point in sexual competition, natural selection would progress only at a glacial pace. Fortunately, their stable microcosm remained free of environmental catastrophes even after the coup left. All these changes had also made the hedonists stay. Their lives were juxtaposed routines of browsing, sleeping, and fornication, troubled neither by the concerns of disease or pregnancy. Aloof and carefree, they enjoyed the most pleasurable times of all mankind, albeit with the intellectual capabilities of more primitive creatures. It didn't really matter, though. Who needed to think when having such a nice time, after all? I, unfortunately, cannot show... Well, actually, no, hold on. I will scroll... No kids unless continuous snoo-snoo. Quite literally. And they all just hang out all day. This is what the female looks like. I don't want Twitch to yell at me about boobs, so I'm going to show you the top half of her, and then I'm going to scroll down to show you the bottom half. It would have been nice if I had gone through here and maybe just censored the book somehow, but I just think it's dumb that I can't show it all off. Anyway. This is what they look like. Strange little creatures. Ooh. We're getting into the cool creatures. I mean, they're all cool creatures, but I like these two. Next part. How do I pronounce this? Insectophagy? Nondescript, quaint human species abounded in the post-coup galaxy. Hundreds of them lived out simple, unnoticed lives, never developing to become sentient, never learning their true heritage as star-born human beings. Yeah, Twitch forbid you to show sci-fi anatomy, I know. Most of them went extinct, not to be missed or even remembered. Those that lingered on managed to survive in shady, quiet niches, never again making any impact on the celestial scheme of things. One such species was the insectophagy. They had quietly adapted themselves for a diet of colonial insects. Jesus Christ. Bear roar. They had quietly adapted themselves for a diet of colonial insects and small animals. Thank you, Bio. Thank you, Lumen. They had faces covered with leathery plates, claw-like hands to dig out prey, and worm-like tongues to scoop them out. All in all, they weren't special in any particular way, but a combination of galactic invasions, coincidence, and pure luck would later make them the longest enduring of all Starmen. The meek would inherit the cosmos, though not just yet. Hot? Hot. Hot. For now, the insectophagy were concerned only with the location of insect colonies and the onset of the mating season. Once again, I cannot show you all of him, but this is one of the insectophagy. And I believe that means that they eat the insects. And he is starting to become a little insectoid himself. You don't need to see the rest of him. Spacers. It must be remembered that the Star People did not succumb entirely to the Ku invasions. While their worlds fell away one by one, some Star People took refuge in the void of space. One after another, entire communities scrambled into generation ships and cast themselves off into the darkness, hoping to go unnoticed by the beings that had overrun their galaxy. Desperate times made for desperate measures. As the Starmen, the descendants of humans, had observed during their initial colonization of the galaxy, thank you for the pet Laros, life in generation ships inevitably led to mass insanity and anarchy. This time, however, humans had to adapt themselves or face extinction. Entire asteroid fields were confiscated and hollowed out to make spaceships of unseen size. These hollow shells cradled bubbles of precious air and water, but no artificial gravity of any kind. It was discovered that a purely ethereal existence would ease the stress of interstellar exile, provided that its inhabitants were adapted for life inside such an environment. Less gravity means more spindly, remember that. Furthermore, people were forced to change themselves. In an atmospherically sealed, gravity-free environment, their bones were left free to grow longer, thinner, spindlier. The circulatory and digestive systems were pressurized to avoid heart problems and congestion. The latter change had another advantageous side effects. Humans could navigate through the void with jets of air propelled from modified parts of their body. Thank you, Bio. Such experiments were numerous and usually plagued with failure. Yet they did succeed in creating a future, sealed tight in their moon-sized, air-filled, weightless havens. The descendants of the Star People managed to evade the scourge of the Ku. It was an endless diaspora. Even after the Ku left, they would find themselves too divergent to have anything to do with their ancestral lifestyles. The survivors of the initial hurdle would never set foot on a planet again. Makes a non-Euclidean spacecraft. And this is what this creature looks like. He is dressed up in some sort of space suit. And they've become so spindly because they no longer have gravity to weigh them down. It's you, Lumen. And I can actually show this one because it's not showing anything. It's a space bat. It's something. The hair is floating, probably because of the lack of gravity as well. It says from the picture, 40 million years from today, spacers like this individual are the only true sentient human beings that survive. They're so comfortable in their weightless refuges that the face of their bestial cousins elsewhere does not concern them. They are also painfully rare. The entire population in the Milky Way does not exceed a few dozen arcs and 100 billion souls. That's 100 billion souls are rare? Then my Syrians are extinct. I'm just saying. They only have like 3 or 4 million people. They became space Slenderman, but can't escape male-patterned baldness. Yeah. While they are still human, they are directly descended from humans without being genetically modified. Next part. Ruin Haunters. A particular human species, singled out by its lucky access to the heritage of its stellar ancestors, would eventually get to play a leading role in the shape of things to come. They had gotten through the Ku invasion with relatively little degradation. Yes, they had been reduced to the level of apes, but their recovery had been quick. Apparently, the Ku had not worked as hard at suppressing their intelligence, nor had they made a comparable effort to wipe away the material traces of the Starmen. Even after millions of years, enormous ruins of the global urban spaces littered the continents of the world. Thus did the Ruin Haunters earn their name. With developed minds and unrestricted access to the wisdom of the ancient cities, the exponential pace of their development was only natural. One by one, they deciphered and built upon the secrets of the bygone star people, until they almost equaled their galactic ancestors in wisdom and skill. All of this development happened in an unnaturally short period of time, and sometimes the old technologies were not even understood as they were blindly replicated. Needless to say, such a pace of development put premature stresses on the social and political structures of the Ruin Haunters. They barely survived the 5 consecutive world wars that raked their planet, 2 of which were thermonuclear exchanges. They made it through. Their baptism with fire had hardened and awakened them. The wars united them politically and pushed their technological capabilities even beyond the level of the Starmen. Coincidentally, they had also developed a dangerous form of autochthonious madness. That's a word. The Ruin Haunters had come to believe that they were the sole descendants and the true heirs to the Star People. They were ready and willing to do anything in order to claim their fictitious, bygone golden age. And they look like a Minecraft villager. This is what they look like. The Ku left them relatively alone, which means they didn't put up a fight. As we've looked through all of these different types of man, redesigned or otherwise, it seems like the Ku only really tweak with your genetics if your species, your specific planet, puts up a hell of a fight. Since these guys got to keep their intelligence and their technology, I think they folded to the brilliance of the Ku. It says here, only 1,000 years after the Ku departure, a Ruin Haunter walks among the shattered remains of a city of star people. The dominating form of an even greater Ku pyramid can be seen in the background. That's true. We learned that the Ku dropped their pyramids there and then leave. Next part, Sentience Reborn. If any sort of periodical arrangement can be brought to the history of mankind, the post-Ku era of emerging human animals can be likened to a series of millennial dark ages. However, like any dark age situation, these periods of silence have finite lifespans. One by one, like stars emerging from the fog, new civilizations were born out of the shattered remnants of mankind. In some rare cases, the recovery was swift and straightforward. In most other situations, it came only after a lengthy series of adaptive radiations, extinctions, and secondary diversifications. That actually almost happened to us a while back. We had a bottleneck and we almost went extinct. So it is bound to happen. It puts pressure on the species. Within these lines of descent, there were as much distance between the initial post-humans and their intelligent descendants as between the first Cretaceous fuzzballs and Homo sapiens. Sooner or later, human intelligence returned to the cosmos. But except for their shared ancestry, these new people had nothing in common with people of today, or even each other. Extinction. Not all human animals made it through. In fact, it must be realized that the majority of post-coup humans died out during the eras of transition. Extinction, the utter and absolute death of an entire family, entire community, entire species, was rampant in the galaxy. Extinction is the rule, not the exception. Many more creatures have gone extinct than lived on or evolved forward. That's not in the book. This is me talking to you guys. That's just how it works. There was nothing cruel or dramatic in any of this. Extinction was as common and as natural as speciation. Sometimes a species simply failed to adapt to competition or the abrupt change of conditions. In other occasions, their numbers dwindled across imperceptible gulfs of time. This way or another, human animals faded out. In all of this death, however, there was new life. As one species vacated a certain niche, others would soon step in to take its place. Adaptive radiations would follow, filling in the blanks with myriads of diverse and varied forms. Despite the fallen, the flow of life would proceed, blazing in constant turnover. And we actually have a fossil. A fossil of what exactly? I'm not sure. But it is human enough in shape. It says here, the fossil of an extinct aquatic human from a forgotten colony world. Unbeknownst to the universe, his kind adapted, flourished, and died out soon after the coup retreat. His tale serves to tell us that all that is alive will inevitably perish, and in its journey, not the conclusion that matters. Now we're getting into the developed beings. Snake people, the descendants of the worms. The scorching sun eventually cooled down, and life flooded back to the surface of her subterranean stronghold. As animals of all kinds exploded into the terrestrial niches that had been left vacant for millennia, so did the descendants of the worms. On the surface, they found new opportunities, as entire assemblages of serpentine grazers, swimmers, predators, and people. One form, descended from tree-climbing mammalian snakes, re-evolved the human intelligence that had lain dormant for so long. They observed, contemplated, and philosophized with novel, spirally coiled brains, and handled the world with a singular pelvic hand, born out from the remnants of their ancestors' feet. They looked nothing at all like their distant human ancestors, but their social development followed a similar path. Several agriculture world empires, followed by industrial revolutions, social experiments, world wars, civil wars, and globalization. But then again, socio-political parallelism in history did not necessarily imply a similar or even recognizable human form. Modern cities of the global snake world were tangles of pipe-like roads, branching three-dimensional railroads, and windowless hole-like buildings. Though their knotted architecture differed from region to region, these settlements generally looked like kilometer-wide balls of glass, metal, plastic, and cloth, wrapped so tightly that a human of today would find it impossible to move inside them. Plazas and open areas were totally absent, as they presented navigational obstacles and areas of insecurity. Their evolutionary background in the trees had made the snake people into borderline agoraphobes. Ah, yes, that's where our agoraphobes come from, because of our tree nature. None of these, of course, were unusual to the snakes in any way. Their relatively alien lifestyle was as peculiar to them as ours is to us. All across their world, the arterial cities throbbed with people, each with their own joys, sorrows, and chores, living out lives as human as any other intelligent being. And we have an image. You remember the worms, the creepy little wiggle babies? These are them in their fully realized forms. They have their hand right here, they have their mouth and nose here, their eyes and ears, and then their snake-like appendage, which is their entire body. And it looks like they're, let's see, a snake person at home enjoying a book while smoking and listening to vibrational ground music. Through the open door, there could be seen the chaotic tangle of the city. Right here. The art is still so fucking fascinating to me, by the way. These are the snake people. This, according to Altomaros, is a human. But 40 million years later. Even more so than just that. Killer folk. Hi, Salem. Welcome in. Next part. Descendants of the human predators, those strange long-eared beings with the hook thumbs and big heads. The carnivores also rebounded into civilization. Their journey involved a series of changes during which they lost the adaptations that allowed them to endure as top predators of their world. The saber teeth, once used for slashing through sinew and trachea, became fragile and thin, useful only as organs of social display. The hook-like thumb claws were also reduced, but not deleted. In their place, the last two digits rotated perpendicular to become newfangled graspers. All this graciously, however, did not mean weakness. Although they were no longer specialized for hunting, the killer folk could still kill with their bare hands, but only if they really wanted to. What enormous claws and teeth could no longer do, they could easily achieve with bow, arrow, flintlock repeater, or gas rifle. Their descent from predators gave the killer folk a unique social profile. Almost all of their religions had rituals allowing for periods of completely natural, animalistic hunts and duels. This necessity of venting these atavistic urges also led to the formation of religious hunter nobilities, privileged warriors who were skilled in the arts of hunting, war, and murder. Entire societies were assembled underneath these ruling classes, orderly communities that erupted once every year into a clash of death and prayer. For thousands of years, nomadic warriors, together with their vast herds of once human livestock, chased and battled each other across a chessboard of continents. All of this chaos was to be swept apart with the advent of modernity. In a development comparable to an industrial revolution, one nation pack of killers devised methods of settled, intensive factory farming. Organized state structure, secularism, and technological leapfrogging were quick to follow. Needless to say, such developments polarized the world into bands of progressive, developed factory herders and increasingly fanatical hunting states. While one side condemned their old animal ways, the other side embraced it with blind zealotry. This was their crisis of modernity. The balkanization of the progressive and conservative factions on the road to global unity. Cecil, what do you want from me? He keeps yelling. He doesn't like the story, I guess. Cecil doesn't like Altomaros. Fortunately, the killers managed to pull themselves through, even after drifting dangerously close to global conflict at certain points. Babe. And this is what they look like as killer folk. He's wearing a hat. Cecil, what? Little baby, what do you want? Hi, come here. Come here. Good boy. What? You can't go over there. You can... Okay, I guess you can. He did it! Cecil really just wanted to love on Wee-Wan, I think. Oh! He got snatched up. Anyway, Killer Folk, I will say, are my favorite. These guys are probably my favorite. They make me very happy. I'm gonna kiss them on the mouth. I mean, what? The picture is described as a young male killer tours one of the myriad of ruined fortresses in his country, testimony of their species' bloody protean history. The planet of the Killer Folk is an archaeologist's paradise. It has more buried dark ages, ruined cultures, and fallen kingdoms than any other world. Ayo? What? I'm not lying. I sketched out aspects of two of my OCDs in a tattoo style. Nice. But yeah, this is... I love him. Cecil, you are in the way and I can't read. Oh. Wait, what? The picture is opposite of what I was expecting. Hold on. I need to... Okay, I'll go back to that in a minute. In the book, it usually puts pictures at the end of the species, but for this specific species, it put it in the front, so it tripped me up a little bit. So we'll just read it and then I'll show you the picture. Tool breeders, descendants of the swimmers. These used to be simple creatures, descendants of a battered people that had taken to the sea. Their remote sapiens ancestors would have given such beings no chance of a sentient comeback. Egg. For they thought their technological advantages were impossible in the fluid medium of the oceans. But the swimmers disproved such predictions by founding one of the most advanced and most outrageously alien cultures of the entire human lineage. Fire, the cornerstone of industrial engineering, was almost impossible to sustain and use underwater. But the breeders simply chose a path when complex toolmaking proved impractical. They bred their tools and machines for them. It had started long before the species was even intelligent. Cecil is being annoying. In the endless variety of life in the seas, the swimmers always adopted and controlled the organisms that were useful in some way. Once domesticated, these creatures were willingly or unintentionally modified through artificial selection and conditioning. The process was slow, but once underway, its effects were formidable. A modern city of the breeders was a sight to behold. Huge, heart-like creatures pumped out nutritious fluids to a network of self-repairing, living conduits. They're literally using bio-creatures for machines. This was their equivalent of a power grid, and it reached every single one of the breeders' huge exoskeletal dwellings, powering bioluminescent lights, flickering cephalopod skin televisions, wow, medical sea squirts, and countless other devices that had been bred from living creatures. The advances in biology had risen exponentially, until genetic engineering was completely mastered. Modern breeders did not even need to use animals. A simple manipulation of cultured tissues and stem cells could give solutions to any problem at hand, you called. The mastery of genetics had conquered many obstacles. The yawning ocean depths, as well as the planet's few tiny land masses, were now firmly within the breeders' grasp. However, they were not content with mere planetary dreams. New forms and bizarre creatures were still being developed in daring attempts to conquer the one realm that was most hostile to them. Sealed in their living ships, breeders wished to return to the stars. This is what they look like. They are descended from the fishers, just the little fish guys, not the finger fishers, but the swimmers. You can see their two legs that are now fins, which is actually not how fins work, but whatever. They're kind of dolphin-like, really. Here's their eyes, their lips, what could be hair. And these are their products. These are the creatures that they've been breeding to make into a technology. Their biotechnological capabilities. Next part. Sauriosapiens. which are the livestock of the lizard herders. Remember, the lizards were smarter than the actual herders because humans in this planet couldn't develop the mental capacities that we used to have, no matter how hard they tried, because there was no environmental pressure to make them do that, and their minds had been so warped by the coup that they couldn't, even if they had the pressure to do so. One of humanity's eventual inheritors was not even human. They came from the reptilian stock that had proliferated during the demise of the lizard herders. Theirs was a true case of a world turned upside down, as the humans degenerated into witless animals. Yes, I did yawn. The cold-blooded reptiles prospered in the tropical climate of their planet. Millennia passed and they began to produce increasingly smarter forms, one of which, distantly resembling featherless versions of the predatory dinosaurs of the past, actually crossed over the threshold of sentience and built up a series of civilizations. These fledgling cultures were quick to understand the true origin of the monstrous ruins littering their planets, ruins that until had been considered natural aberrations or timeless memorabilia of gods. Now, however, they saw the intermingled ruins of the Ku and Star People for what they really were. It was through this understanding that the biologically unrelated Soros took up the cultural identity of humanity. In their archaeological efforts, the Soros began to understand that the animals they used for food and labor were descended from the founders of their very existence. And somewhere in the stars lurked the forces that malformed them, forces greater than the Star People, dark forces that might someday return. The human animals served as a reminder, just as Pandaravis had, that if the Saurosapiens wanted to assure their continued existence in the cosmos, they had to be watchful. The pressure of such a reality put their cultures under enormous stress. Some factions turned to made-up religions and remained ignorant under an umbrella of comforting fantasies. Others acknowledged the threats of the galaxy, but reverted to a paranoid rhetoric of conservatism. The galaxy had scared them greatly. Finally, there were those who saw the galactic redoubt and acted to face the odds, however great they might be. Conflicts and even wars were not uncommon between these three factions. In the end, the centuries-long dispute began to resolve in progressive factions' favor. As they expanded the spheres of knowledge, influence, and activity, the Saurosapiens began as human as any other civilization opening up to the galaxy. I forgot that's what that looked like. So these are the sapient sauropoid thing. This is the featherless raptor, as they have called it, and this is a human. The one that could never gain its intelligence back. They instead became livestock, and our reptilian companions of 40 million years ago are now the ones becoming sentient, sapient, and walking through the doors that humanity left open. Next part. The modular people. Descendants of the colonials. We remember the walls of flesh. That's these guys. The blind workings of evolution followed the unlikeliest paths. It usually does. Let me get a sip real quick. The very existence of the modular people was testimony to this fact. Their ancestors, the colonials, would have been seen as hopeless by almost any observer. No, it's not illegal. I'm talking a lot. I'm also yawning a lot because I'm breathing. They lacked coherent organs, and their existence was limited to carpeting water shores like mats of algae. Thank you. But as degenerate as they were,
The colonials were resilient survivors, able to hold on to life in the harshest of conditions. As time passed, they began to organize themselves in differentiated colonies instead of homogeneous mats. In the colonies, each human cell could perform a singular function and began from a union of others. Thus began the Great Age of Organization, during which different colonies competed with each other by developing specialized human cells that would give them an edge in the struggle for life. Some colonies grew enormous taproots that were able to siphon resources from far away. Others abandoned roots altogether and began to move themselves on starfish like foot segments. Some colonies came up with units equipped with claws and poisons, taking competition to a brand new, deadly level. Others responded to the threat with armor plating or watcher cells equipped with enormous eyes. The eventual winner of this colonial arms race was a sentient colony, organized around hyper-specialized units whose entire purpose was to direct the others. These colonies spread around the planet as they adapted the parts of their rivals to function within themselves. Thus were the modular people born. I don't know if any of you guys know what colonial creatures look like, the colonies of it looks like a single organ, but it's actually dozens of organisms all squished together working as one unit. That's what this is. That's what's happened to humanity from this perspective. Living in fully industrialized megalopoli, they came in an indescribable variation of shapes and sizes. Anything from castle-like guardian forests to diminutive scuttling couriers was a member of the modular whole. They could combine with each other and split up, or exchange parts as needs presented themselves. The only thing constantly in all of their protean existence was their mental and cultural unity. Due to their biological structure, these people had managed the impossible. They were actually living in a world of peace. Oh, Elon, I know, I'm sorry. Fucker website reset my streak, so here we go. Woo. I know that before your streak ended, you were at 60. So you're technically 63, and I will not forget this. I swear I will not I will not forget this. Due to their biological structure, these people had managed the impossible. They were actually living in a world of peace and utopian equality, where everyone was happy to be parts of greater, united wholes. And this is actually what they look like. Over time, these guys evolved to be different pieces of different parts of the body, and they all work in a different way. So you can see some of these are some sort of breathing. These are the eyes that they've developed. This is the central hub, the one, the leader, nearly. These are hands. This is a piece that they've picked up. These look like sensory organs of some sort. And this guy has something similar. You can also see down here they have little feet that they've developed from some of these beings. They look crazy. They're another species that I really like because of how they look. The picture description is, a modular colony treats a specialized digester unit with sprays of anti-ulcer medication produced by the medical drone held in its hands. Note the differing segments, each of them mutated human beings in themselves. Yes, love? Oh, your game. Everyone is me. So apparently in Eidolon, Lava Flame, the creator, just shrunk everyone. So for April Fool's Day, you're all small. You're all me. Next part. Ptero Sapiens, the descendants of the Flyers. The Flyers' supercharged hearts had given them an evolutionary winning hand, and they diversified to fill up the heavens. It was only a time before the competition of the skies got too intense, even for their souped-up metabolisms. Some lineages gave up their wings and returned to the ground, living as differing sorts of predators, herbivores, and even swimmers. Their aerial adaptations gave them an edge on the ground, and they produced forms of stupendous size and agility. There were wonderful beings, but no sentience came out of the terrestrial sky beasts. Instead, civilization flowered in the skies. One species from a line of waiting, stork-like predators evolved a brain that was large enough to imagine and act upon the world. Their feet, already versatile to catch slippery, swamp-dwelling prey, got even more articulate and assumed the role of hands. As a compensation, they lost some of their aerial streamlining, but what they could not do with their bodies, they were more than able to make up for with their minds. The power of flight made the Saurosapiens a global folk, before they could invent nations and borders. With such an inherent ease of travel, ideas and individuals diffused too fast for social differences to ossify. Acting with planetary awareness, they farmed their gigantic terrestrial relatives, raised cities of perches and fluting towers, harnessed the atom, and began to gaze up to the stars, without having to compensate too much from the average individual's social welfare, and without dividing up the quarrelsome factions. As egalitarian as their life seemed, they paid a stunting, inevitable price. Their hearts, even in boosted state, had trouble supporting their power of flight and grotesquely large brains at the same time. As a consequence, their species had an ephemeral lifespan. A Saurosapien was sexually mature at 2, middle-aged by 16, and usually dead by 23 years of our time. This grim cycle caused them to appreciate every moment of their existence clearly, and they pondered upon it with feverish intensity. A shelf of scrolls by Pterosapien philosophers would have been the envy of every human library. In their cities, life blazed away with unreal speed, rushing past to meet fleeting deadlines. As a species, the angelic flyers were victims of heart disease. And this is what this looks like. This is what this being looks like. He's wearing a hat, got some sort of chest plating, and has some very fancy tattoos on the wings. And because this is their feet, they use their feet as hands. Because it seems to be a very common feat for anything that becomes sentient enough to use tools, they will start using tools. But they need those appendages to do it first. Obviously, humans use our hands because as a member of the great ape species, or not species, family, I believe, we can grab with our little paws. Other species that have hands like us could one day reach sapience like we do. But we were put under a very specific evolutionary pressure to make our brains grow. But that doesn't mean other animals on this planet can't also deal with that. And that seems to be the case for these people. Next part. Asymmetric people. Descendants of the Lopsiders. Remember the creepy, floppy fish-looking guy with the long arm? That's these guys. Although contorted by gravity, the Lopsiders managed to regain their sentience and develop a civilization in a short few million years. I will let you know that Homo sapiens sapiens, the species that we are now, is only roughly 300,000 years old, give or take. And written civilization is only 6,000 to 7,000 years old. Not to say we didn't have some sort of civilization, maybe up to 12 or even 13,000 years old. We were doing something back then. We even have statues going to 40 and 50,000 years ago. But that's just to give you a time frame of how long or how quick something can really go. Our species in general has been alive for millions of years. So for these guys to go for a few million years, 3 to 4 million, and reach sentience and sapience is pretty good. Squat, pancake-like buildings spread all over the planet. These constructs looked like squashed bunkers, and they were never more than a few meters high. They don't need to be, after all. They did not seem like much, but such structures were entrances to underground homes, schools, hospitals, temples, universities, but also embassies, prisons, asylums, command centers, and arsenals. They lived strange lives, but the Lopsiders were human in all of their virtues and evils. Thus, it was only natural for them to expand outwards and look for new frontiers to colonize. Fortunately, their solar system harbored other planets, similar to the Lopsider homeworld in almost all respects. All respects except gravity. But they weren't willing to let such trivial details stop them. Throughout their history, humans had always risked changing themselves to preserve their future. It was a risky gamble, but it had paid off since the days of the Martian Americans. Basically, the very first humans that left Earth. But re-engineering the flattened Lopsider body for a benign gravity was a monumental task indeed. Suffice to say that the experiments took millennia to achieve even limited success. After countless attempts, the asymmetric people were born, or rather made. Their bodies were changed considerably, with what had been shovel-like toes to slither through high-gravity dirt and become centipedal legs, and the singular grasping hand was elongated to an extreme degree. Their grotesque faces had been inverted and turned upside down after reverting from a flounder-like existence. Twisted as they were, members of this new race enjoyed tremendous advantages over their flattened forefathers. Hi, Renetta, welcome in, and thank you for the hug on Leon. We're having a live reading of All Tomorrows, a book by C.M. Kozman, made in 2008. It is a hypothetical of what humanity could achieve and be reinvented as in terms of evolution. Their social development also paralleled that of the bygone Martian Americans. Once again, there was a golden age, followed by increasing tensions and interplanetary war. But unlike the Martians, the asymmetrics ruthlessly exterminated their parent race and went on to rule the solar system alone. On the way, they stumbled across the remains of the Khu and the Star People and advanced immensely. Triumphant on their own realm, they returned to the heavens for further exploits. These are the first descendants of humans that have gone to the stars again. Thank you, Renetta, for the cat tea. And they are horrific looking. This is what they have been reduced to in how they look. They're horrifying, but apparently successful. It says here the picture is described as an asymmetric nobleman poses nude to reveal his bizarre anatomy. Normally, these creatures dressed up in elaborate garments that resemble heaps of interconnected, enlarged stockings. Which makes sense, their bodies are very strange. So this guy is literally posing for a nude photo, which is kind of funny. I was wondering why he wasn't clothed. Everyone else was. Symbiotes. Descendants of the parasites. Now remember, the Khu made a type of human that could latch onto species and act like leeches and ticks. That's what these are. As time passed, the relationships between the parasites and their hosts got connected to such a degree they began to involve a cooperation of the individuals. These were no longer single-sided relationships. In exchange for the host's nutritious blood, the parasites offered their heightened senses an early warning against predators and other hazards. A great arms race of symbiotic relationships thus commenced. Certain parasites offered their hosts larger eyes, others sharper senses of smell, hearing, or even additional defensive weapons in the shape of venomous saliva, malodorant sprays, or an extra bite. The hosts returned the favor with longer-running legs, stronger bodies, and specialized ergonomic nesting sites rich in blood vessels and covered in insulating fur. Different complexes of parasite and host species evolved, compatible only amongst themselves. The development of such creatures was, in a way, reminiscent of the great modular colonies, thriving on their own world light years away. But unlike the modulars, the components of the symbiotes belonged to different species instead of modified variations of the same basic organism. In eventuality, both relationships led to the same point: sentience. In the secluded forests of a certain continent, a new parasitic species developed. They did not have the ballistic poison sprays, infectious stings, or the grossly hypertrophied arm claws of their relatives. Instead, these parasites offered a simpler bargain: an ability to think in return of total submission. Initially, this relationship was more like a horse and a rider, but after a few 100,000 years, the symbiotes could manipulate their hosts like puppets through a combination of tactile and olfactory signals. A few more millennia, and these combined beings developed an order not unlike our own, complete with countries, politics, and even war, albeit reduced in the newly globalizing world culture. In this age, technology filled most functions of the hosts, but a thriving husbandry of these creatures still remained due to tradition and simple efficiency. An average symbiote would begin the day on his business host, hello, and move on to a more comfortable domestic one when he returned home after work. They wear their hosts like clothes. And perhaps on the olfactory television, he would smell news of the excavations of the million-year-old Ku ruins, of the marvelous discoveries salvaged from the Starman wrecks, or of the enormous radio arrays that rose everywhere to listen to the stars. It was a pattern that was being repeated all over. So this is the species. This is the actual creature. This thing that it's riding on is the host. This is the parasite. This is the being with the... This is the creature with the sentience. This is not. Which I find very cool. Symbiote poses on one of its several hosts. In the background can be seen some of their rural housing, with man-sized doors for their mindless hosts and smaller holes for their intelligent patrons. Next part. Sail people, descendants of the Fingerfishers. The Fingerfishers were already among the most divergent of the post-human races. With harpoon-like digits, almost crocodilian muzzles, they looked nothing like their parental stock, but even this form would look conservative to their sentient descendants. With many small scattered islands, isolated subcontinents, and differentiated niches, their homeworld was an evolutionary cauldron, where isolated members of certain species could, under the right circumstances, evolve into wildly different forms. This condition was similar to the island realms of Madagascar, Galapagos, or Hawaii on old Earth, except this time it was on a global scale. Some descendants of the fishers, trapped on lonely islands, grew smaller and developed their fishing claws into graceful wings. Others took directly to the sea and became the analogues of whales, dolphins, and mosasaurs. Within the evolutionary bubbling, one particular lineage gave rise to the ancestral sail people. They too elongated their fingers into wings, but these were not used for flight. Instead, they became sails that drove them effortlessly across the oceans. With fingers turned into sails, they used their mouths and extended tongues to catch their pelagic prey. These organs eventually assumed the role of the fisher's long, atrophied, dexterous hands. The need to better navigate the angel seas put an inevitable pressure on their memories, and the sailors' brains grew correspondingly. It was only a matter of time until one of these navigators became smart enough to think. Even when sentient, the sail people still needed a long time to achieve any sort of social stability. Their scattered world made for a tremendous diversity of cultures, which competed and fought just as resiliently. Across generations, untold flotillas of tribal warriors battled each other in epoch-spanning, pointless conflicts. Nomadic warriors and pirate societies inevitably came into being, prolonging the uncontrollable cycle of violence. Only when certain warrior tribes developed warfare on an industrial scale, and the state society needed to support it, and then only when this notion of modernity gave rise to an idea of peace, did the Sail People finally manage to unify. Generations of blood had stained the oceans for far too long. And this is what they look like. These are their hands that had turned into sails. They were the hooks that they used to catch food. And now they use these tongues as their hands, essentially. After that, Satyriacs, descendants of the hedonists. You know, the ones that have to bang a lot in order to have kids. Their pleasure-drenched existence, locked between their static paradise world and their inherently slow pace of evolution, seemed immune to change. Perhaps this was true for 1,000,000 years or so, but on larger scales, complete stasis is a fable. During a particular era, geologic upheavals threw up huge masses of land over the shallow oceans of their world. The hedonists, until then trapped on a singular island no bigger than today's Iceland, were not late to colonize these pastures. This was more of a necessary exodus, since the events that raised the new lands had also thrown up enormous clouds of ash that smothered... fly! Psst. Cecil, come get the sky raisin. It's fucking with me. This was more of a necessary exodus, since the events that raised the new lands had also thrown up enormous clouds of ash that smothered the atmosphere and blocked out the sun. Their innocence finally spoiled, most of the hedonists died out, unable to adapt. The only survivors were fast-breeding freaks, who had abandoned the reproductive quirks of their ancestors. It was these forms that colonized the newborn continent and gave rise to a multitude of species, which included the Satyriacs. It's spelled satyr. Sentient heirs to the hedonists. These beings resembled their ancestors to a great degree, except they now sported enormous tails, boneless organs of balance woven out of extended pelvic muscles and fat. Along this appendage, their entire bodies were reoriented into horizontal, almost dinosaurian postures. Although they had abandoned the frantic reproductive strategies of their ancestors, their social life still retained a delightful tint of casual promiscuity. The Satyriac, which makes sense, satyr. Satyrs do that. Satyrs are known to be like that in the ancient Greeks. Their civilization was quick to establish itself globally, for even with the additional landmasses, the terrestrial domain of their world remained no larger than Australia. For a while, 3 and then 2 land empires competed with each other, before dissolving into a myriad of smaller nations and finally reunifying into a coherent world order. From this point on, the Satyriac world once again became a Valhalla of pleasure, with festivals, concerts, and ritualized orgies punctuating every working week. That line got me. Give me just a second. Stinky kitty. This time, however, it could all be savored by true intelligence. And this is what they look like. They look kind of like dinosaurs. I really like the little tendrils they have on their backs. Also, this guy is singing. He is a performer of some sort. It says here, a Satyriac audience goes wild at the performer hits the climax of his song. Such events are an everyday part of the Satyriac life. Alright. Next part. Bug Facers. Descendants of the Insectophagi. Over time, their insectivorous ancestors came to resemble their prey. Hardened, leathery faceplates, once used for defense against stings and bites, ossified and became integrated into the jaw structure. Their hands and feet, with reduced numbers of fingers and toes, developed into pincer-like affairs. Even their metabolism reverted partially into ectothermy into the balmy, lazy climate of their planet. But it was none of those adaptations that gave them the edge in survival. Simply put, a congenital defect allowed them to regain their sentience. Even after the smothering by the coup, the genes of the Star People remained dormant in their cells. Through pure coincidence, one lineage of insectophagy developed an atavistic throwback, resulting in larger brains, which just happened to be useful in cracking open insect nests with crude stone tools. It was all down here from there onwards, although millennia long in itself, the development from the stone axe to spaceship was an eye blink in geological time. Like many other species, the bug facers passed through consecutive cycles as agrarian, in their case high farming, empires, colonial endeavors, industrialization, massive world wars, and finally, globalized world states. But there was one thing that set the development apart from all post-human species. They faced another alien invasion. History does not record much about the invaders, except that unlike the coup, theirs was a singular effort, and it was beaten off in an intense cycle of orbital and terrestrial wars. Although vanquished, the invaders did succeed in leaving behind their traces. They introduced their own flora and fauna. The music is getting loud as fuck. I was not expecting that. Let's turn that down a bit. Although vanquished, the invaders did succeed in leaving behind their traces. They introduced their own flora and fauna, which flourished on the Bugfacer home planet long after they departed. More importantly, they imbibed the poor Bugfacers with a pathological interspecies xenophobia, to the point that they were fearful even of their post-human cousins on other stars. Through an ironic twist of fate, their fears would be more than justified. Though not just yet. The Bugfacers still had time. And this is what they look like. This is a bug-faced celebrity, arguably the most beautiful girl on their planet, poses before a coastal village. In the distance can be seen gas bag-like tree creatures, relics left over from the mysterious alien invaders. And yeah, there she is. Isn't she pretty? The art in this is still really, really cool and really, really good, and it makes me very happy. And the crazy thing is, you can still just barely make out the human features of them. Next. Astromorphs. Descendants of the Spacers. Remember, humans also started hiding in non-gravity asteroids. They could breathe because they had atmospheres, but they did not have gravity. Smash. So that's these guys. Initially refugees, the Spacers were quick to master the vastness of interstellar space. They're isolated. I know, honey, you're small as fuck. Their isolated space arcs joined together and multiplied to form a gigantic interlocked artifact that was large enough to contain entire worlds. Now the music is too quiet. Crying. Here we go. No planet lay inside the astromorph capital. Only cavernous, gravity-free bubbles where the inhabitants could finally develop to their fullest. Freed from the constraints of weight, their bodies grew spindly and insectile, with individual digits extending into multitudes of thin, versatile limbs. Other than these, the only developed organs were their derived jet sphincters, which went on to become the principal means of locomotion. But above, basically it's like the propulsion system that an octopus would have. But above all were their brains, the bulging, swollen brains. With no hindrance from gravity, the human brain could grow into unprecedented sizes. Each generation devised experiments that produced offspring with greater cranial capacity, giving rise to beings who went through their everyday lives thinking in concepts and structures scarcely comprehensible to people of today. Basically, they got big-ass brains. The physiological limitations of the human mind had long since been debated. Now it was established that these limits were indeed real, and individuals who could break them would likewise conquer new grounds in philosophy, art, and science. Everything changed. Yet some aspects of humanity, such as the basic desire to expand, remained. Enjoy your 30-day rat streak, Renetta! To this end, the astromorphs built great fleets of globular subarcs and spread their influence across the heavens, into every stellar cluster and every star system. Within less than 1,000 years, the galaxy was straddled by a new and far more alien empire of man. Strangely enough, its dominion included none of the new emerging post-human species, for its masters had completely lost interest. The planets, those stunting, gravity-chained balls of dirt and ice. The newborn arcs settled comfortably in the outer rims of star systems, quietly observing the lives of their struggling relatives. For the first time in history, there were actual gods in the myriad of human skies. They were silent and weren't even noticed for most of the time, but their watchfulness was ultimately going to pay off. And this is what they look like. They are gross and creepy. And that's their push them by limb. That's their I'm gonna go fast button. Supercomputer versus Apple home computer from the what, 1980s, 1990s? Something like that, yeah. Next part. Second Galactic Empire. Over time, the sentient post-humans began to reach out to the galaxy. They inevitably stumbled across the ruins of the Starmen and figured out their interstellar ancestry. These discoveries were followed by a realization that there might be others like them, unimaginable distance away. Thus, the fledgling civilizations sent about to probing the skies. The contacts, all established by radio communication, were not spread out evenly. The Empire began little more than a few million years after the coup left, with the first dialogue between the earliest killer folk and the Satyriacs. A few thousand years later, they were joined by the tool breeders, hailing out from the ocean depths through living radio arrays. Basically, humanity and its descendants are reconnecting. The second wave of sentient species joined in during the following 10 million years, as the modular whole, Terra Sapiens, and the fledgling asymmetrics contacted their celestial cousins. Finally, in the next 20 million years, newly evolving civilizations such as the Soros, Snake People, and the Parasite Symbiotes, and the Sail People successfully contacted the burgeoning Galactic Empire. The Bugfacers were aware of the whole process, but due to their xenophobic experience, they only opened up after a staggering 40 million years of silence. That's a very long time. This union was an empire of speech, for actual travel between the stars was too difficult to be practical. Like the bygone colonies of the Starmen, the posthumans cooperated through the unrestricted exchange of information and experience. Although covering every aspect of an astonishing variety of cultures, the Empire's efforts focused on two main issues: political unification, though not homogenization, and galactic awareness. Homogenization is when you're all forced to be in the same culture, do the same things. They're not negating others' cultures. Constant readiness for possible alien invasions. Everybody had come across the remains of the mysterious coup. Nobody wanted to repeat of the same scenario. When the Second Empire ran into the astromorphs, who had silently saturated the galaxy with their own empire of man, they feared the worst, but luckily for them, the godlike beings were not interested in the Second Empire, nor any of its worlds. The astromorphs were given a wide berth and accepted as they were, incomprehensible, omnipotent forces of nature. This coordinated effort lasted for almost 80 million years, during which its member species attained previously unimaginable levels of culture, welfare, and technology. Each species colonized a few dozen worlds of their own, in which nations, cultures, and individuals lived to the fullest potentials of their existence. Needless to say, all of this was possible through constant communication and total openness to the galaxy. Most communities took this for granted and dutifully participated in galactic dialogues, but there were others, silent, darkened beings who refused to join in. Through them would come the ruin of the Empire. The Gravatal, descendants of the Ruin Haunters. So open source, socialist, everything? Kind of, yeah. You know, how we should be. After the lesson of the coup, the Second Galactic Empire kept a constant watch against alien invasion. Ironically, they neglected to look among themselves. The second great invasion of the galaxy came not from the outside, but from within. The Ruin Haunters, who were lucky enough to inherit the secrets of the Starmen and the coup when other species were mere animals, had experienced a tremendous advance in technological prowess. All in all, they were as sophisticated as, if not more, than the asteromorphs of the Void. But their ascendancy, that's the word. But their ascendancy was not a sane one. Recall, most Ruin Haunters were already deranged with a twisted assumption of being the sole inheritors of the Starmen. They refused to communicate with their relatives on other planets and kept to their own affairs. This neurotic hubris assumed truly dangerous proportions after the Ruin Haunters modified themselves. The origin of this modification lay in an earlier catastrophe. The Ruin Haunter's sun was undergoing a rapid phase of expansion, and the species, as advanced as it was, could do nothing to stop the process. So the Haunters did the next best thing and changed their bodies. The infernal conditions of the solar expansion meant that a biological reconstruction was totally out of the question. Thus, the Haunters replaced their bodies with machines. Yummy main sequence star. Yum yum. Floating spheres of metal that moved and molded their environment through subtle manipulations of gravity fields. In earlier versions, the spheres still cradled organic brains of the last Haunters, but in successive generations, ways of containing the mind within quantum computers were devised, and the transformation became absolute. The Ruin Haunters were replaced by the completely mechanical Gravatal. While not even organic, the Gravatal still retained human dreams, human ambitions, and human delusions of grandeur. This, combined with mechanical bodies, allowed them to cross space with ease, made interstellar war a frightening possibility. And this is what they look like. This is a Gravatal. And you can see another one back here. Once again, this is a human. Next part, machine invasion. It took a long time for the Gravatal to prepare. Propulsion systems were perfected, and new bodies capable of withstanding the interstellar jumps were devised. But when they finally decided the time was nigh, nothing survived their slaughter. The invasions followed a brutally simple plan. Target the world's suns were blockaded, and the light was trapped behind specially constructed million-mile sails. If the dying worlds managed to resist, an asteroid or two finished them off. Enormous invasion fleets were built, but it was rarely necessary to deploy them. The machines had caught their cousins completely off guard. The Great Dyings, all of which occurred in a relatively quick 10,000-year period, stretched the boundaries of genocide and horror. Almost all of the new human species, unique beings who had endured mass extinctions, navigated evolutionary knife edges, and survived to build worlds of their own, vanished without a trace. Even the coup had been loyal to life. They had distorted and subjugated their victims, but in the end they had allowed them to survive. To the machines, however, life was a luxury. Such thorough ruthlessness was not ironically born of any kind of hatred. The Gravatal, long accustomed to their mechanical bodies, simply did not acknowledge the life of their organic cousins. When this apathy was mixed with their insane claims as the sole heirs of the Starmen, The extinctions were carried out with the banality of an engineer tearing down an abandoned building. Under the reign of the machines, the galaxy entered a brand new dark age. This is a picture of it happening. The picture is described as a rare instance of a direct invasion by the machines on one of the shore cities of the Killer Folk. Most of the time, inhabitants of the Second Empire were wiped out globally, without the necessity of such confrontations. But the Killer Folk weren't, little bitches, and they came in. They wanted to fight. I love the Killer Folk, by the way. Just letting you know. Here's the machines attacking. When considering the invasion. Next part. The machine invasion brought on the greatest wave of extinctions the galaxy had ever seen. For it was not a simple act of war by one species against another, but a systematized destruction of life itself. Yeah, the great monoliths. When considering such a vast event, it is easy to get lost in romantic delusions. It's almost as easy to write off the Gravital as evil as it is to consider the entire episode as a nihilistic end-of-everything kind of scenario. Both of these approaches are, as they would be in any historical situation, monumental fallacies. To begin with, the Gravital did not consider themselves evil, not to their own perception. These beings, although mechanical, still lived their lives as individuals and operated inside coherent societies. They had surrendered their organic heritage, but their minds were not the cold, calculating engines of true machines. Even after giving orders that would destroy a billion souls, a Gravitas would have a home to go to, and incredibly as that might sound, a family and a circle of friends to which it felt genuine affection. Basically, these things are mean as fuck. I think apathy is worse than hatred, if I'm being honest with you. Because at least hatred has motivation. The great dimensional monoliths that herald doom of entire worlds and spell the eventual end of existence. Anyway, yeah. But for me, this is worse. Because if you're just treating someone like a pest, or an inconvenience, or an ant, yeah, with hatred you still care. With apathy, you feel nothing, and you're still committing horrific acts. So in a way, it's worse. Despite being endowed with compassion, their harsh treatment of the organics was a result of, as mentioned before, a simple inability to understand their right to live. Furthermore, the Gravital did not constitute a singular, indivisible whole, whose entire purpose was to wreck the universe. True, their technological advancement had allowed them to form a pan-galactic entity, but within itself, the Machine Empire was divided into political factions and even religious faiths. Superimposed over these fault lines were the daily lives and personal affairs of family and individuals. Like any sentient being, they had a sense of identity and thus differing agendas. Nor did the machine invasion mean the end of everything. There certainly was a widespread destruction of life, but what was lost was only organic life, consuming energy, directing it for reproduction, thought, and even evolution. The machines were as alive as any carbon-based organism. Despite the turnover, life of a sort survived, and would be seen, even preserved, in some of its organic predecessors. The subjects. Descendants of the Bug Facers. Remember those guys were like, we don't want to talk to you guys because you're aliens. We got invaded once. Stay away from us. It's these guys. The Bug Facers, racially shy and xenophobic due to their background of repeated alien invasions, became the first species to face the Gravital onslaught. As ironic as their fate seemed, the Bug Facers were the luckiest of the post-humans. Instead of being exterminated like the rest of their cousins, they survived as the only organic beings in the Machine Empire. The precise reasons for their retention remain unknown to this day. Perhaps the machines hadn't perfected their ruthless apathy by then, or perhaps they pitied the poor organics and allowed them to maintain a stunted parody of their existence. Whatever the reason, the Bug Facers endured, but they hardly resembled the original ancestors anymore. Genetic engineering, a lost art of the galaxy-threatening coup, was mastered almost as comprehensively by the machines. Not hesitating to warp the beings which they did not really consider to be alive, they spliced their way into the Bugfacer DNA, producing generations of literal abominations. Would a woman or man of today show any apprehension toward reassembling a computer or even recycling trash? Such was the attitude of the triumphant Gravital. Thus, multitudes of subjects were produced, disordered to such an extent that even the meddling of the Khus seemed comparatively timid. Most of them were used as servants, caretakers, and manual laborers. These were the lucky forms. Some submen were reduced to the level of cell cultures, useful only for gas exchange and waste filtering. Others were molded into completely artificial ecologies, baroque simulations that served only as entertainment. Some machines, with their still human ambitions, took this practice into a new level and produced living works of art, doomed one-off creatures who existed purely as biological anachronisms. Being it as a tool, slave, or entertainment, humanity narrowly held on to its biological heritage, while its machine cousins reigned supreme for an unbelievable 50 million years. So there is a picture, but once again, I can't show it all. It's a fan-like decoration. Have you considered Bug? No, how about Robobug? Hold on. Let me bring you back down to the other parts. And then this is what they look like here. They've been manipulated to look like any sort of design, just like what the Qd did to humans of old. It says here, the Bugfacer archetype, flanked by two of his twisted descendants. To his left, a phallus-bearing polydactyl, bred as a sacrificial offering in one of the many different machine religions. To the right, a one-off work of art, designed to play its modified fingers like a set of drums while ululating the tunes of a certain pop song. Basically, it's fucked. That's all you need to know, is it's fucked. Next part, the other machines. Recall that despite its galaxy-cradling might, the Machine Empire was not homogeneous. It contained dozens of differing factions that did not always agree on everything, including the treatment of their downtrodden biological subjects. Some machines, over a process involving several religious, social, and philosophical doctrines, began to comprehend the universality of life and the common origin of organic and mechanical humanities. Initially, such individuals lived in seclusion, or withheld their beliefs from the world. They secretly engineered lineages of subjects that could live, move, and think as freely as they could. In a new memorable instance, the engineers fell in love with their creations, and their martyrdom inspired other machines to think just a little differently. Eventually, the ideology gained enough momentum to be practiced openly in everyday life. However, the sect of toleration, I wanted to say totalitarian, and that is not the word, soon ran into odds with their hardline, pan-mechanical rivals. The seething intolerance between the two factions finally broke free when some tolerant machines wanted to set several worlds aside for the unrestricted development of biological life. All hell broke loose, and the Machine Empire, the apparently seamless monolith of the galaxy, experienced its first short, bitter civil war. The war did not cause any lasting damage, but it plainly illuminated one fact. The greatest entity the galaxy had ever seen was not without its problems. And we have a picture of a human Bugfacer woman and a Gravital falling in love. They're both human, remember that. These are both human, some 100 million years in the future. Next part, the fall of the machines. Return of the Spacers. In the longer run, the internal struggles of the Machine Empire just might have led to its downfall. Hug the slab, love the slab, love the slab. To be fair, she's just a robot fucker, you know? There was no need to wait that long, as the Empire died a shorter but immensely more cataclysmic death. For a long time, the Machine and the Astromorph empires had been eyeing each other nervously. They hadn't yet run open to confrontations, as the Asteromorphs kept mostly to their outer space arcs, and the Machine Empire occupied their planets. In almost every inhabitable solar system of the galaxy, the same upside-down tension built up between organic beings living in the void and machines inhabiting perfectly terrestrial worlds. Which is really fucking funny to think about. Machines are living on a planet that a biological being would love to be on, and the biological beings are living in the coldness of space. Power was even balanced between the two rival empires. Moreover, this balance involved forces strong enough to destroy planets en masse. Each side knew that any kind of war would result in mutual annihilation, and only insanity could start such a conflict. The post-Civil War empire of the Machines did go insane, in a sense. In order to divert attention from internal struggles, it needed a new enemy. Ain't that the fucking truth? That's always what happens. Oh, our country's struggling? Oh, this is happening and we need a distraction? Distraction! Let's go fight someone across the street, across the fucking waters. Still human. How unwise that this enemy came to be the Asteromorphs. It's unnecessary and nearly impossible to describe the carnage that followed. No shit. I lost my spot. The conflicts lasted anywhere up to a few million years, and the resulting loss of life, both mechanical and organic, made the initial machine genocide seem irrelevant. When the cosmic dust settled, the winners displayed themselves. The conquerors were the Asteromorphs, changed beyond recognition after 50 million years of continual self-perfection. Their grossly hypertrophied, that has to be a better way to say that word. Hypertrophied brains stretched out like wings on either side, and their finger-derived limbs had formed an intricate set of sails and their legs. Endowed with superior technology and limitless patience, these beings almost completely destroyed the machines, despite losing a substantial number of their own species. The conflict also thrust the Asteromorphs into the affairs of their long-neglected human cousins. And impossible as it seemed, some of the machine subjects had survived the ordeal. Now the Asteromorphs could no longer look away. With the machines gone, it was up to the Astromorphs to clean up after them. They took up the subjects and used their genetic heritage to populate entire planets. During this age of reconstruction, which lasted for another 2 million years, many Asteromorph world builders emerged as true gods, creating inhabited worlds almost out of scratch. Their subjects, meanwhile, became the inheritors of a truly new, war-torn phoenix of a galaxy. And this is the image of the Asteromorphs now. Remember when they were just long with hair sticking up and their fingers all long and spindly? They now look like this. This is their brain. Next part. The post-war galaxy. When replenishing lost worlds, the Asteromorph gods also took measures to ensure the continued safety of their creations. The abrupt rise of the machines had shown that unless carefully regulated, the wealth of the stars could always host a race of pan-galactic usurpers. The Asteromorphs, watchful but ever transparent, did not want to interfere directly. Instead, they produced terrestrial versions of their own kind to regulate the galaxy. Because remember, they can't walk on planets. Gravity would probably crush them. They are used to no gravity. They adapted their delicate ethereal fingers into spidery limbs and shrunk their brains considerably to readjust to the rigors of gravity. The resulting sideline was stunted but astromorph standards, but still it produced demigods in every sense of the word. These beings, known as the terrestrial spacers, or simply the terrestrials, nurtured and controlled the development of the post-war civilizations on many planets. They acted as caretakers, prophets, kings, and emperors, but also as grim reapers, as the occasion dictated. The endeavor did not always proceed as smoothly as planned, of course. Most of the time, the newborn races refused to heed their mentors, and in several cases even rebelled against them. Needless to say, this crime was always punished with a swift extinction. Furthermore, even the terrestrials grew corrupted. That's how it happens. Instead of offering guidance, terrestrials on many planets simply played God, weaving contrived religions around themselves to shamelessly exploit their subjects. It was not ethical or even productive, but this method seemed to guarantee more stability than actually trying to bring up the new races. Humans will always be paranoid, spiritual, religious creatures. At least for a while. And it seems like that's what this is pointing to. This way or another, organic sentience reclaimed its dominance in the galaxy. The new empire, managed by the terrestrials, populated by a myriad of descendants of subjects, or overseen ultimately by the omniscient astromorphs, achieved great... Jeez, he does run-on sentences sometimes. Achieved greater progress and a longer-lasting calm in the galaxy than all of its predecessors combined. And you can have a picture of it here. This is one of the asteromorph terrestrials that are crafting things. This is a building of some sort that they're in. And I believe they're creating something. It says here, a new terrestrial shows the highly divergent yet bizarrely human anatomy that is characteristic of its species. These particular terrestrials maintain a religious hegemony over their clueless subjects, dressing up in elaborate veils and headgear to assert their divine inheritance. The new machines, next part. Long after their fall from grace, remember the Gravital, the machines still clung onto existence. During the initial aftermath of the war, the asteromorphs had planned to exterminate every last one of them, only to discover that the machines were simply too useful to destroy. For millions of years, they had perfected the interface between mind and machine to such an extent that they could live and operate in the most inhospitable conditions. Such beings, deprived of their galaxy-straddling power, would make invaluable contributions to research and exploration in the new empire. There was a sense of poetic justice in all this. The machines, who once distorted biological life forms to their whim, were finally treated to a similar fate. To begin with, the asteromorphs completely scrapped their ability of self-contained gravitational manipulation, the very force that had rendered them invulnerable in the first place. They were given finite lifespans and slightly numbed imaginations, so that history would not repeat itself. The degradatory nature of these changes, however, did not imply an overall regression. Unlike their ancestors, the new machines were endowed with nanotechnological bodies that could remodel themselves continuously, which meant they could come in every shape and size imaginable, and then some that could not. A machine citizen could live for some time in the void of space, conducting research, and then transform into a completely different body plan for a holiday, or a cometary halo, tropical jungle, or a methane ocean. They would, I don't like when it says he or she, it bothers me. They would also make the trip personally by growing temporary hyperdrives and ramjet engines. Cecil, you're a Mow. My cat is meowing. Despite their breathtaking versatility, the machines were never as common or prominent, even after completely accepting their roles as lowly citizens of the Empire. The greatest wars in conceivable history had ingrained the organics with too deep a mistrust of their mechanical neighbors, and the new machines were always treated with a degree of discrimination. The sins of their fathers had come to shackle the most splendorous of all human species. And I believe this is a form that they can take. This is one of the forms they're taking. Let's see. A machine citizen of the new empire. She sports a dazzling pair of branching arms that suit both the latest fashion trends and her job as an artisan. Machines following fashion might seem unusual to a reader of this era, but never forget that these beings are human intelligence, only in different bodies. It also just looks really cool. She's doing it. Whatever she's doing it. Did he bite you? Cecil, why you bit Papa? Go on. Next part, Second Contact. With successive waves of machine-aided discovery and colonization. Hi, Starrod. We're reading a book. We're reading a book for April Fool's Day. The new empire grew exponentially. Such was the growth of wealth and progress that its description would need to use of concepts that remain unexplored today. To talk with a man of today about the comings and goings of the new empire would be akin to giving lectures of the 20th century geopolitics to a hunter-gatherer. Yikes. This magnificent entity was not blind to the universe around it. It turned its eyes, its ears, and sensors and probed the events of the surrounding galaxies. The New Galactics suspected that the surrounding nebula might also have their indigenous folk, and it was wise to contact them before a misunderstanding or conflict could occur. Cecil's getting mad. On a darker side, these observations also served as lookouts for potential invaders. Even then, the memory of the coup were not forgotten. The discovery was eventually made. One of the neighboring galaxies was showing patterns of activity that were the unmistakable signs of a sentient organization. Some thinkers reviled the discovery of a new civilization, while others feared a return of the coup. Fortunately, the second encounter with an alien species proved to be a peaceful one. Perhaps the intelligence of both galaxies were finally mature enough to meet without quarreling. The other galaxy was dominated by connecting unions of different beings, presided over by various kinds of amphicephaly, bizarre creatures that resembled giant snakes with heads on both ends, one of which bore a secondary retractile body that could be used to interact with the world. Apparently, they had undergone alternating series of regressions, evolutionary radiations, and self-imposed genetic makeovers, just as humanity had. With all of their wild difference, the amphicephaly were welcome. They were the first, but surely not the last. We're meeting other ALMMs that are not human. This is what they look like. They look really fucking freaky. This is the body that they use to interact with the world. This is like the weird body that holds on to them. An amphicephalous ambassador with spaceships typical of their kind. Her strange body plan betrays an evolutionary history as complicated as that of humanity. Earth rediscovered. The purpose of this work is not to describe the limitless progress that followed the cross-galactic contact. One could go indefinitely, chronically how the united galaxies re-encountered and subdued the coup, how they cradled their suns with artificial shells, multiplying their inhabitable zones 1 billion-fold, how they crisscrossed interstellar space with wormholes, made travel a thing of the past. Ultimately, descendants of those beings even conquered time itself, prolonging the existence of their minds indefinitely via rejuvenating technologies. For a time, all men were gods. But from our vantage point, one discovery truly stood out in this orgy of advance? What is this wording, CM? Compared with gargantuan achievements like the taming of space and the construction of star shells, it was a mere blip, a revelation of long-forgotten trivia. This was a rediscovery of Earth, the birthplace of humanity, where the omnipresent astromorph, the star-gliding machine, and the millions of humble resident races could all trace their origins. It was made quietly, but a singular researcher combining the vestiges of forgotten history, decade after decade, millions of years of war, invasions, and extinctions, had burrowed the evidence thoroughly and comprehensively. When she finally came across irrefutable evidence, nobody was around to celebrate. That would come later. This is the image of what is happening. This is someone making a discovery about Earth. It's a person. Learning about their ancestor, the thing that they no longer look anything like. By the time of Earth's rediscovery, humans had diverged considerably from their ancestral forms. Return. The discovery sparked a certain amount of interest, though nowhere as much as other breakthroughs had. To most humans of the cosmos, their ancestral birthplace was simply an interesting piece of information, a piece of trivia with which they had lost all ties. Still, a ship was sent forth, and it landed without ceremony, For now, there was no intelligence left on Earth. Too far away from the main centers of population, it had been completely ignored, gone stagnant and feral, but still, it was home. When the explorers stepped out, human feet trod on old Earth once more, after an absence of 560 million years. Mankind was back home. Last part, all tomorrows. I must conclude my words with a confession. Mankind, the very species which I've been coddling from its terrestrial infancy to its domination of the galaxies, is extinct. All of the beings which you saw in the preceding pages, from the lonely worm to the mind-reading cell people, from the megalomaniac Gravital to the ultimate galactic citizens, lie 1 billion years dead. We are only beginning to piece the story together. What you read was our best approximation of the truth. Why did they disappear? Perhaps it was a final, unimaginable war of annihilation, one that transcended the very meaning of conflict. Perhaps it was a gradual breakup of the united galaxies, and every race facing their private ends slowly afterwards. Or perhaps the wildest theories suggest it was a mass migration to another plane of existence, a journey into somewhere, sometime, something else. But the bottom line is, we honestly don't know. Ultimately, however, what happened to humanity does not matter. Like every other story, it was a temporary one, indeed long, but ultimately ephemeral. It did not have a coherent ending, but then again, it did not need to. The tale of humanity was never its ultimate dominion of 1,000 galaxies, or its mysterious exit into the unknown. The essence of being human was none of that. Instead, it lay in the radio conversations of the still human machines, and the daily lives of the bizarrely twisted bug-facers, and the endless love songs of the carefree hedonists, the rebellious demonstrations of the first true Martians, and in a way, the very life you lead at the moment. Many throughout history were unaware of this most basic fact. The coup and dreams of an ideal future distorted the worlds it came across. Later on, the Gravital, with their insane desire to recreate the past, created the biggest massacres in the history of the galaxy. Even now, it is sickeningly easy for beings to get lost in false grand narratives, living out completely driven lives in pursuit of non-existent ultimates, ideals, climaxes, and golden ages. And blindly thinking that their stories serve absolute ends, such creatures almost always end up harming themselves, if not those around them. To those like them, look at the story of man and come to your senses. It's not the destination, but the trip that matters, and what you do today influences tomorrow, not the other way around. Love today and seize all tomorrows. And we have images. We have a picture of a ship flying over Earth, and we have an alien scientist holding a very old skull. It says here, the author, with a 1 billion-year-old human skull. And yeah, that's all tomorrow's. It's not too long a read. It's about 120 pages, give or take. Maybe 110, since we are not counting the illustrations, because the illustrations are also a very big part of the book. I did have to hide some of them, because the guy does draw all of the humans in their full anatomy, so you can see genitalia, but it isn't in a sexual way, it's just in an anatomical way. But I also understand that Twitch doesn't like seeing that, so I just, to be on the safe side, I kept it blocked. But yeah, this is one of my favorite, if it's freaky, but it's a really good read. And it's a very fun world-building exercise to be like, what would happen if we spanned over 1 billion years across the galaxy? Where would we be? Who would we meet? How would we meet them? Would they be anything like us? Would we be anything like us after
half a billion years of evolving from each other but away from each other. Because that's actually how most species, well, not most, all, that's how all species on Earth have evolved. We all come from one thing, and it's called Luca. Luca means, what was it? Something universal. Last common universal ancestor, I believe, is what it what it means. And it's a little cell that we can tie all of our DNA back to. And it's fascinating because that's where we all come from. In fact, we can see in our faces the faces of our great ape ancestors. The great apes can see their more bipedal mammalian ancestors. Before that, it was, as jokey as it is, fishy-like faces. After all, jaws used to just be scales that came out. The teeth in the jaws were once nothing like that. And we've evolved through billions of years from just Luca, one thing that we've been able to point at. From the Cambrian explosion to the 21st century Earth. And in the story, there always seems to be some sort of species, whether it be the human species or another, that shows up and decides to tinker with the DNA just a bit, and we've been doing that too. I can't remember when we started really fucking with our own DNA and like the DNA of other animals. But if we had the technology to thank you, Sugar Skull, for the sippy. If we had the technology to do what these guys could do, it would be a plethora of possibilities. And thank you for the stretch. And evolution and DNA enhancement is where this book seems to explore the most. And it's one of the main reasons I really like it, because I love evolution, I love biology, I love thinking about, in the book it mentioned all of these different species that were dropped on these planets and changed to match their planets more as some sort of cosmic punishment. They started filling niches on their planet, and they started splitting off away from each other until they were different species. That happened with us. We are related to the animals we eat, after all. Hi, Riza.
It's me, I'm a pretty bad, thank you.
But we are related to the things we eat. It's not cannibalism, obviously. But that's what happened to these guys. Humans split off and became even more diverse animals. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. All Tomorrows is really fun, and I'm glad I could read it to you guys today. We will continue actual world building next week. I am considering making a few things specifically for Eldritch Nova, because I will be starting that soon. I possibly will be starting it this Sunday, but I don't know. I still have to confer with people. Yes, I know, Reza. I'm gonna be starting my own TTRPG, and I'm very scared. I'm very nervous. But thank you guys so much for hanging out today and listening to me give you guys a little read. It went a little slower than the book is. The book is not too long a read. But I was lollygagging a little bit. I didn't want to read it, and I didn't want to read all of it in like an hour and a half.
Hans, eat the horns, pretty vampire. Yeah, pet him. Get him.
But I am going to go rest my voice. I'm going to get ready for Vandalt in a few hours. And I'm going to send you guys to another bat. Another bat who's playing a Star Fox game, which is kind of funny. But grab your messages, and thank you for listening.
I hope you enjoyed the read. I enjoyed the read. It was very fun. And we will work on stuff next week. I'll see you guys tomorrow for more Dark Souls. We have a few more bosses that we have to swing in on. I believe we're in the Tomb of the Giants right now? Yeah, we're in the Tomb of the Giants. Tomb of the Giants is really cool, by the way. It's very dark. Very, very dark and very annoying. But yeah. See you guys then. Goodbye!